hello, this is Caribbean Rhythms episode. No, I can't do that. Oh boy, well, this is kind of like a Caribbean Rhythms episode. This episode of Content Minded. This is my first solo show. It's been quite a while since I've actually recorded a solo show. A dialogue or a video. I really can't, in some ways, conform to the short video presentation of the YouTuber the way that other ones, even my friends, the way that they're very accustomed to, people like Oren McIntyre or Charlemagne, Prudentialist even. It's like, I like the podcast format because, I'm a blowhard and I like to ramble. But anyways, this is episode 20. I can't believe it's been 20. I'll talk a little bit about that. Episode 20 of Content Minded. And the reason I'm doing this is because, frankly, I've been researching for different streams that are coming up at the time of this recording. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, I've had 2 exciting streams already, which is kind of weird talking about considering I'm recording it beforehand, before the streams actually have occurred. I'm guessing they're going to be Kino and Nectar. I hope they will be. They will be. So the first one is with Last Things on Tuesday at the time of this recording. And the other one is with, I can't believe this is amazing, Patrick Casey, Restoring Order. Let me do the death metal one for him. Oh, there you go. He'll appreciate that. Both of them are going to be talking about the work of art and modern art, and I think it's quite special that I'm on both of them. And I really wanted to do this because, well, frankly, I've been too caught up in other things to edit down an episode. Next week will probably be Stain Haynes, and that's I think another 5 hours, actually. So I'm going to have to, take a scalpel to it. It takes me a long time because I like to go through the episode, especially if I haven't earmarked every single swear word, just so I could get monetization. That's what I'm reduced to, penny pinching. Listen, let me talk a little bit about that, actually. You see, on this journey, I know this is going to sound totally pathetic, but now that there's been 20 episodes, and I can sort of take stock and reflect on what's been going on this summer, these past few months, well, more than a few months, I think that it's been quite a journey, and I've really sort of come into my own. And hopefully maybe I could do either as an extra bonus thing, I'll go back to the shorter videos once in a while, or do these ones, kind of like a Caribbean Rhythm style variety podcast. I'll have music in between. All the music for this will, of course, be provided by Philip Daniel. Please go support him. He's a great friend of mine. And, I'll get him on the show one day. I was thinking of doing an episode about classical music with him and another Twitter account that I am very fan of, who is also in the same lane. I believe he also is a composer. But anyways, I wanted to talk about a variety of different things in this episode before we go. So please, the spicier half where I talk about the blue-yellow country and nationalism, or what I call wholesome Chungus nationalism, will be on Patreon, along with other things that are probably going to be too spicy for, normal consumption. But, I'm just kind of noited. I'm actually thinking of getting Big Sergey from Twitter on the show, which I'll probably have to put on, in all honesty, put on Odyssey the way things are going. I don't know. I guess, Alexander McCoy and the Duran, they have monetization. They get away with it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just being too paranoid. But anyways, I wanted to talk about a variety of different things. This thing that I'm doing right now, I'm going to be talking about a variety of things. I want to talk about the nature of simping, what it means, unrequited love, But before that, I wanted to talk about the recent nationalist or sort of populist right victories that have gone on. But so yeah, then I'll talk about a bit about simping. I wanted to talk about a bit about various art that I've consumed. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by my cat, who happens to be wandering in my plants up above me. Get down there, Gertrude. Get down. My God, I'm not editing this, so I'm trying to watch my words. So I wanted to talk about a number of different things. One of them is a film. One of them is a song. The song is by Jerry Cantrell. It's called Siddhartha. And the film is called Duke of... Oh, God, I can't believe I watch... sometimes I go on a Tubi crawl and certain things catch my eye, purely for an intellectual endeavor. But I wanted to review the film The Duke of Burgundy. And yeah, it's very... maybe I'll have to put that behind the paywall as well. But I'll try to keep it less spicy for YouTube, perhaps. So anyways, I wanted to reflect first about the nature of what I'm doing. And hopefully you people have tuned in to hear me. Or if you're a first-time listener, then hopefully you get acquainted with my work. As, this terminally online fat guy from Canada that wears a fez and has very, weirdo tastes and interests and intellectual proclivities and, happens to be an artist and whatnot. Because that's another thing, too, about doing the single video thing. I think that I'd much rather write an article. It's like people that actually write scripts. The way I do it is that basically, with every podcast and with every video I do, I have a few basic points. A lot of the times they're mental points that I have where I really want to do it off the cuff, and I think that people appreciate that. I want to go back to the older style of YouTubing or podcasting. I want to sort of, not care about the highly stylized details or anything like that. I think that there's a purity in that, I feel. And another thing I want to talk about is also the nature of older women, but that's going to be a bit personal. But anyways, I mean, I am always an open book. I'm an open book. So, yeah, people that write scripts for YouTube, I'm not knocking anybody. A lot of them are my friends. I know even Matt, Prudentialist, writes scripts. But I figure, if I'm going to write a script, I might as well just release it as an article, I think. I think that it's much better to do a bullet point thing and then work it out from there. But those are technical details. Now that this is episode 20, I really wanted to I wanted to give my appreciation to everyone who's supported me for the past, I would say, what has it been, 6 months? However long it's been. I have gone through a lot of changes and have sort of had to restructure myself in a way that sort of tries to fight some of my demons. Procrastination, complacency, being loyal to a situation that you're sort of stuck in. But, a lot of people that have followed me from the Follow the Rules day, I try not to talk about it as much. I try not to even once in a while I'll pop in and I'll see what's going on. And, if there's anything going on at all. But anyways, that's besides the point. I sort of had to really fight my own demons in a sense. Because in a way, as much as I feel, and this has always happened to me since the beginning, since 2014, since the time I sort of became a figure, from the sort of earliest days onwards, where I was sort of wedded to a number of projects. I always say this, to be wedded to the vision of someone else can be a curse and a blessing. It's a curse in the sense that you are not, I know this is a stupid term that is used by the psychology industrial self-help complex, but you're not self-actualized in a sense. You don't have a destiny that is created by you. Or rather, destiny is not necessarily, in a sense, wholly a product of your own agency. But destiny is mixed in with your agency, in my belief. there is destiny that is laid out for you. There is a path that is laid out for you, but it is up to you to sort of do what you will with that, to affirm or reject it. It's very Stoic in a sense. The freedom to the Stoics is essentially that. This is something that many moons ago, when I was in first year philosophy, or no, it was the second year, we were doing the Stoics, and my professor, who became a mentor of mine, maybe I'll do an episode about him. He said, say that there is a horse cart, and there is a dog that has been tied to the horse cart because of the owner going into a shop or going into a bazaar. Now, the horse starts moving. Now, the dog can get dragged and can hurt himself, or worse, to keep it, PC. Or the dog can go along with the steady pace of the horse. Now, the dog has no agency, you would think, right? But the dog really does have agency. Wait, I think, what Stoic, used this example? Was it Xenophon, or was it, I think it was it Epictetus, I think? I think it may have been Epictetus that said, this metaphor, this proverb. Now, the dog does have a choice. He can go along with it, or he cannot, and suffer the consequences of both. But in that condition, you have a choice. I think destiny is like that. Destino, for your Tetsuya Naito fans. And that's a good example as well if you follow Japanese wrestling. Tetsuya Naito was the Stardust Genius. He was the boy wonder. He could do it all. The fans loved him, but then he fell out of favor with them. He couldn't do it anymore. There was this fan vote who would become the... what match would be at the... What was it? What Wrestle Kingdom was it? Was it Wrestle Kingdom 10? No, it must have been an earlier Wrestle Kingdom, where the fans overwhelmingly picked the main event to be Shinsuke Nakamura versus... was it Hiroshi Tanahashi? It must have been. And, he was really jilted about that, even when he won the World Heavyweight Championship for the first time. The sort of driving obsession that leads you to falling out of favor. And then what does he do? He goes back on excursion to Mexico. He reinvents himself. He hooks up with Los Ingobernables, with, who was it at the time? Was it Rush, I believe? And it was Rush or Rush. It was La Sombra, who then later on went to WWE, and I think he's in AEW now. And, he reinvents himself. He becomes a heel. But the thing is, he becomes an anti-hero. Because the fans, when he comes back, they love him. They love his rebelliousness. Especially, he becomes almost like the Japanese version of Stone Cold, where he's meant to be the bad guy. He's meant to be the Rudo, the heel. But they love him so much that they have no choice. His merchandise sales jump through the roof. So the whole thing with him is destino. It's like his destiny to become the greatest, to become, first was the double champion, now the world heavyweight champion. And I think that, I remember one time, it was this G1 Climax, where it was Kevin Kelly on the English commentary that said, Naito, he knows he has to win because there's more years behind him and there's years ahead of him. There's more matches behind him and there's matches ahead of him. So I think that with me, there's hopefully more streams ahead of me, more podcasts ahead of me than there are behind me, but who knows, right? The point being is that as soon as you talk about wrestling, I get diverted. The point being is that I think that destiny relies upon a reciprocal engagement in terms of the fates sort of spinning your own yarn of your life, but you choosing to do with that. But I think that most people don't necessarily have the agency to act upon it. And sometimes it takes a crisis moment. And I've always said this. I said this in my stream, which you could go to my Patreon, patreon.com/GenerProductions, the night that it happened, where I hit a crisis point where I knew that things cannot go forward. And that as much as I lament it, I think that, I did have good experiences on the previous podcast. I did get to network a lot. I did get to grow my own legs because doing this podcasting, knowing that there's a pause button, knowing that there is pause button, knowing that there is an edit feature to what I'm doing is much of a different animal than doing live streams all the time, doing multiple live streams a week. But in a sense, there was, I always thought that there was everything there. There was the chemistry, at least I thought initially there was the chemistry. There was the aesthetic, there was the, something about the promotion just never clicked. Something about having a lot of big guests, but then star F-wording, but never actually getting to a huge subscriber base the way that, I don't know, a lot of these newer Twitch stream orientated, like massive panel YouTube shows with people that I don't want to insult anybody because this is not the place. I have much more meaningful things to talk about. I have much more meaningful things to discuss here than drama. But, I think that the problem was, certainly when it comes to the amount of grifting, I mean, there's a certain suaveness to the art of grifting. There is a certain level where you have I say grifting, but monetizing yourself. I've built up a reputation among people, and I think that people appreciate it. And I think that as much as I don't deliver like on the exact day of when I say things are going to get delivered, I try my best. And I think that I compensate because I realize that for many years, I've always realized that I'm on precarious ground. And that, yeah, there's probably people that, talk mad smack about me in group chats or whatever, or, say I have a bad take, which I will talk about with the simping thing. But I think that there is, in a sense, a position where, especially as a face, especially as, using a real name, there's always a precarity to the way you stand. And I've actually, in a sense, taken some heat for associating with certain people, but I don't really care. Because I value certain friendships I have with people over whatever, like, so-called failure of optics there is. Because all of us, behind the scenes, we all sort of agree on certain foundational things, I think. But I don't want to talk about the scene so much as my own thing. I think that over the past few months, I've realized that when you sort of work to the best of yourself, when you really sort of put those considerations of like, oh my God, I'm not growing as much as I want to, and oh my God, I'm not reaching 10K yet, blah, blah, blah. Like you're not, at the sort of where you perceive your value is. You sort of have to slot those things to a sort of recessed region of your own mind. And you just have to go forward and do things. No matter if you feel like they're not reaching as much people. But that being said, in some ways I'm grateful for the experience I had. But the reason I bring this up is that, the point I want to get at is there is a reciprocity between what you perceive as your destiny, your calling in a way. Because to live life without a calling is to not really live at all. There is a reciprocity between that destiny, that sort of clearing of the way that you have towards your own fate, and how you respond to it. And there never is always a cut and dry method by which you engage in this. It's something that you can only experience. There's there's guides and there's philosophy, Lebensphilosophy around how to live a good life and how to capture destiny, blah, blah, blah. But the point being is that you have to really find what you're attuned to. Because I bring up procrastination and complacency because let's face it, it's like what Sartre said. Every time, there's this relationship between exploitation and victimhood, they always mix in with one another. The victim is always the perpetrator, or the victim has a piece of the perpetrator within them. And it's never this like cut and dry thing. The problem is the world that we live in nowadays wants to moralize this and say that there is pure victims and pure perpetrators. But that's not really the case. But an existential point, rather than a political point in that statement or that notion, is that you always sort of consent to a bad arrangement in a way. You consent especially if you know you can get out of it. Now, for many, many months, for a year in fact, at the 2-year tenure I spent on that other podcast, many people have come to me in private and said, Gio, you should do your own thing. Gio, you should go your own way. Gio, I'd much rather listen to just you. And I'd say, no, I can't because I'm loyal to so-and-so and I have a good thing and I don't want to book guests and he does this work and I do the front end work and I think it's a good arrangement. But really those were just copes. Those were excuses for my own complacency. So really, I felt like I was in a good position. I got to talk to various people that I found interesting, some not so much. And sometimes I had to grit my teeth and go along with it and co-sign to things I didn't want to co-sign to because I knew that that was the trade-off for basically sitting down on stream and doing nothing for 2 years. Not doing nothing, but doing sort of letting things slip by that I could have done on my own because I felt like that was the sort of brand that I was loyal to. People knew me as a co-host of that other show. But it really wasn't, though. And that really is the metaphor. And, I could be bitter about it, or I could accept it. I could accept that that was my folly. I could accept that that was my own inner weakness that always, throughout my whole life, followed me. That's sort of running away from my own problems. But now that I'm on the dawn of turning 30, I don't want to run away from my problems. I want to confront them head on. And I feel that I have to an extent. I've built up a reputation. I've built up a show, multiple shows now with Prudentialist. Hopefully, I haven't squandered the good faith of people that trust me and support me. And I'm trying to work on myself health-wise, even though I know that I fail all the time chronically with that. But, maybe I'll talk about intermittent fasting a little bit too. But that's another show. I wanted to do a show dedicated on the whole fat acceptance thing. But maybe I'll talk about that with somebody who talks about health, or that would be a good episode. There's a few people I have in mind. I know my friend Stinkbra wanted to do a show on health and things of that nature. I could probably get Stony Herbalist maybe one day, but I'd have to do a lot of research and reading the way that I did with Peter Nemitz. So I think that, there is an element of complacency there. And when you break from that, now you have the obligation to do something. I'll never forget what my good friend Gonzalo Lira, what he said to me on that stream. He said, Gio, your problem is you're afraid of succeeding, really. And I said, yeah, you're right. Because the work, I thought about doing my own show for many months, for a year actually. I thought about, when you go to listen to that Alex Kashuta stream, the second one, I was already thinking about it. I just needed the opportunity. I just needed that stark realization. When I took that Twitter break after people dogpiled me for blackpilling, a lot of it was because my former so-and-so, we had this big argument behind the scenes in the DMs, and I realized that, this guy doesn't care about me, and I could basically, in other words, I was told, the door is always that way. And you'd figure, whatever, I'm not going to go into drama, but I, in some ways, you're grateful for that. You're grateful for the, someone who is an enmity to you, someone who puts a challenge in front of you. Because anyone that treats you in a certain way, anyone that presents obstacles in your life, I know this is just self-help nonsense, but it's the truth. It's a cliche for a reason. You can almost thank those people because they revealed to you a truth about yourself and about others. They gave you an opportunity to truly realize where you stand. And that I am grateful. That I am finally at peace with. And maybe I'll talk about when I talk about the Jerry Cantrell song Siddhartha. But yeah, that's just my general spiel. On to the next. So it was a very good song by my friend Philip Daniel. That's called what's it's called? Safe from All Earthly Sorrow. That's the song. So, Philip Daniel, again, please go and support him. This comes from his album. All the songs from this album, or rather, all the songs featured in this podcast is from his recent, sort of, what would you call it, EP that he's uploaded called Transcendental Studien und Melodien aus dem Englischen Hymnal 1 to 5, is that what it is? It's in... He tends to title everything in German. Anyways, this is my white pill for the stream. This is about the recent populist victories throughout the Western world. Again, I'm going to kayfabe all of the recent business in the Blue Yellow country to the end of this stream that you can find on patreon.com/Genre Productions, because I want to talk more about Western Europe and about here in Canada even. So recently, Pierre Poilievre was elected the head of the Conservative Party. Now, full disclosure, strategically I support Poilievre. Maybe I shouldn't say that, and my endorsement would come with baggage. But let's say that, for all honesty's sake, I think that he was given the nod by the Conservative Party. But I do have my criticism, though. I have my criticisms, just to keep it fair and balanced. He was given the nod by the Conservative Party. I knew he was going to win as soon as Stephen Harper gave him the nod. Because I think that Stephen Harper, for all of his faults, all of his many faults, and the fact that he isn't exactly a right-winger or a conservative or whatnot, I think that in a time of the Conservative Party going through great transformations during his reign, if you can say that a leader accomplished two things that they set out to accomplish, any leader who has a plan and sets out a plan to accomplish certain things, that has a vision, he did them. Number one was to unite the Conservative Party. For those who don't know, during the 1990s and the early 2000s, up into the 2000s, the Conservative Party in Canada was deeply fractured. There was reform out in the West, socially conservative under Preston Manning, and there were the progressive conservatives. There was a brief, I think, interim government, what was her name? Kim Campbell, I think. So the Conservative Party was everywhere. It was on the verge of turning into a regionalist party. And during the, early 2000s and the 2000s was like the sort of the reign of Jean Chrétien. Stephen Harper had a vision, which was to unite the Conservative Party in Canada, to create a true opposition once more, the way that there was in the 80s, where, Mulroney led the Conservative Party. And, I'm not a fan of Mulroney. I think he's a neoliberal shill. I think that NAFTA was a huge, one big fat mistake, to quote Orange Tiny Hands. But Stephen Harper, he accomplished that, and for that, I'll give him that. And another thing that he wanted to do, which he did for a brief time, was to absolutely smash the Liberal Party. And he did that. There was a combination of reasons why that happened when Jack Layton and the NDP became the official opposition for that brief period. And the Liberal Party ran terrible candidates that were unlikable and didn't really have a vision, really just coasted on their laurels for so many decades. Stephen Harper accomplished the impossible, right? So in that sense, you could say that Stephen Harper and the way that he controlled the party, and if this is a criticism I have of him, I know this is probably boring to people, so I'll stop. Because everyone wants to talk about Italy, but I'll get to Italy. So, Stephen Harper, the way that he controlled the party with an iron fist, which, in a sense, I agree. You probably needed to do that. But then he would suppress social conservatives, and he would do funny business like that. And he was really a big fan of giving money to that one nation in the Middle East, but whatever. Stephen Harper is, if anything, a Machiavellian tactician. And so really him giving the nod to Poilievre I think we're at this crisis moment with the reign of Justin, that they really would tolerate more of a explicitly populist candidate. Not saying that Palaver is a pure populist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he has those leanings at least nascently, at least nominally, even though he probably wouldn't even be a Republican in the U.S. He wouldn't be an Orange Tiny Hands brand of Republican, even though people try to like smear him and say he's an extremist, which is another funny thing. There's someone that I particularly do not like in the Canadian media. I really just don't like this guy. He's this other hack, you're right. But I shouldn't call him a hack because, he did a pretty good thread. That Justin Ling guy, that lib, I think he's part of some identity group. Anyways, he had this thread where he actually said, you guys got to chill out. Like, Palaver is not this F word. Nowadays they're calling Georgina, an F word in Italy, which I think is quite funny. So he had this thread where he's like, you people really, you're just hurting yourselves by going into this like rhetoric where Palaver is kind of like Orange Tiny Hands. And it's really something else. And I think that it's very interesting how the party, I think, if they would have elected someone like Shadast, it wouldn't have worked out. It wouldn't have worked because there would be a massive contingent that would have defected. There would have been a massive contingent that said, you know what, I'm going to go over to Maxime Bernier because you people, you don't respect us. Sorry, I meant Giorgia Meloni, the new Prime Minister of Italy. I misspoke. I said Georgina, but it's Georgia. I think that Palaver, there's potential there. The only thing I would say is that he has to really focus on restructuring the party. He has to really ramp up on being a populist, I think, at least strategically. He really has to sort of work behind the scenes with more, let's call them based in red-pilled forces. But I understand for the time being he has to kayfabe those things. And I think he really has an opportunity. He has an opportunity to truly do something in 4 or so years during the hellacious Justin reign. I think that he has an opportunity. It may not even be 4 years. If Justin, if he screws up even worse, who knows what's going to happen? If there is an economic downturn to the point where the NDP doesn't support him anymore in their coalition in all but name only. Because let's face it, the NDP, they're getting a raw deal here. What did Trump say to Hillary? She's getting schlonged. This guy they got, the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, he doesn't realize he's being played for a fool. He's basically a Janny. He's a Justin Janny. If you have a coalition, the way it works in a parliamentary system, you have coalition governments, you have people in the seats. You have people that are in the cabinet. You have people that are taking up positions of power. You're sort of at least partially sharing the power and responsibility. But the NDP, they're supporting the Liberals. They have in this. They're getting played so hard. It's comical because not only do they not have any cabinet positions, not only do they not share power, but not only does Jagmeet Singh have to sweep it up, Jan, but really the NDP, they've squandered their mandate. They're no longer, like, what are the NDP nowadays? The New Democratic Party. Are they the left-wing woke party? Because that's the option they have. They went full on into wokeness after Jack Layton died, God rest his soul. He wasn't I don't agree with Jack Layton, but he was a good dude. I don't fault him. I mean, I don't exactly like his wife. I think she's been a disaster for her writing, but Jack Layton, he was a man of character, I feel, even though I didn't agree with him on anything. But let's face it, there are a few options that the NDP can have. You can either go back to old labor, you can go back to like a European style, like Labor Party. Well, I'm not the Labor Party of current day, but, let's say the old school Labor. You could go back to those type of politics, which, I mean, can never work. Heckin' awesome, wholesome, multiracial working class. Like, yeah, go for it. Go for it. I'm sure all those people that showed up in the convoys, I'm sure they're going to vote for NDP nowadays, I'm sure. But anyways, laborism is dead, obviously. There's no such thing as like the labor union movement, because that really was what the NDP, for a history lesson, that's how they started off. They started off as a Christian socialist party under Tommy Douglas that were largely supportive of labor and certain Catholic immigrants that came here and worked in these union type jobs. That doesn't exist anymore unless Canada fundamentally restructures itself. So they have that option. But down the trajectory that they're already going, which is terminal like wokeism, like that doesn't work either, because the Liberals are cornered on that. Justin Trudeau is the most wokest of woke world, leader figures in the world, right? Like, he's the woke head of state. Like, what are you going to do? The NDP is irrelevant. They might as well just become Liberals. You might as well just have a two-party system like they have in America. Or, like they nominally have in England between the Conservatives, the Tories, and Labour. So, the NDP, they're screwed. I don't know what to say. They deserve it, though. They deserve it. But, yeah. I know a lot of the old hats probably hate Jagmeet Singh, but they can't say anything in public about it. But if things get worse, they will. They will. They'll realize that the Liberals play them. Because the Liberals are the ultimate Machiavellians. There were Liberals who were like kind of like a bit conservative in history. There were Liberals who played off like working class people against each other and immigrants. They truly are the natural governing party because they're sort of amorphous. And that's the thing. Justin Trudeau, he's really destroying, I feel, that sort of amorphous nature of the Liberal Party. That sort of cold Machiavellianism, because he's making so much stupid mistakes just to virtue signal. His daddy would have never done that. His stepdad, I know I have to put that in there. I wonder if they're going to ban me for disinformation for that one. But, I joke. It's a boomer humor joke. But, his daddy, Pierre, he was incredibly evil for what he did to Canada. But at the same time, he had a brain to him. He was intelligent. He was a pure Machiavellian. He really knew how to pit people against each other. But anyways, that's just Canadian politics. Nobody cares about that. But I will talk about Canadiana itself when I get Martin on the stream. My good friend Martin. We're trying to plan a stream. He's gonna be free soon. Talk about Schmidt and other things. So, anyways, to move on to the election victory in Italy, the Brothers of Italy party. Now, it's really quite disgusting, the rhetoric we're seeing, like right off the bat. You have like the Jason Stanley types with their various grifts, their anti-F-word grifts about, oh my God, this is the far-right party, and she's basically a female Benny, a female Benny, She's a Benny Musso with lipstick, right? But I think Giorgia Meloni, she really tapped into a spirit that, and I'll talk about Italy a bit in the sort of Patreon portion when it comes to identity and nationalism. She tapped into a spirit I feel that a lot of Europeans are feeling, that they want to go back to a sense of themselves. And the fact that she's tied in at least some economic populism. And of course, right off the bat, today I saw this tweet by some bureaucrat, some hideous ghoul that my good friend Weinlandgruber on Twitter, he retweeted, or he quote tweeted, that I believe BAP retweeted. This guy, Michael Beschloss, saying the new Italian PM says we will never be slaves at the mercy of financial speculators. Sounds just like 1930s in Italy and Germany. No thanks for the memories. Just like the 30, yeah, because of course, if you're gonna take the Dinesh D'Souza route, you would say that that Benny, he was in the socialist movements before he became the F word, right? So that oh my God. Oh my God, right off the bat, right? So but that is so clever. That is such a clever trick to like use woke politics to weaponize it against any opposition to financial capital. That's brilliant. I tip my hat off to that one. But that's so egregious, that is so fallacious, that is so, like, these people will literally become the matrons of capital if it means that they get to own the chuds. If it means they get to own the right. They will go into this, ultra-capitalist death spiral in order to own the chuds, which I find hilarious. But it's really quite revealing how many people. What did the number to this tweet do? What is it? Oh, only 28,000, which is not good for like a viral tweet. For Musso enjoyed publicly referring to those type of people as financial speculators. History of the 1930s shows that F-wordism leaders in the United States have been very eager to line up and pool resources, often in secret, with leaders in Europe. Whoa, that's great. That's amazing. You mean to tell me when some Nouveau Droit people do AmRen conferences that there's some, dark far-right money there? Maybe Peter Thiel is making that happen, but, that's really interesting. It's really quite funny, though. I think that here's the reality of it is, I don't mean to blackpill. The reality of it is that in Italy, it's very contentious politics. It's an active politics. And coalitions, they don't tend to last. But I think the fact that the overwhelming landslide of all regions in Italy voted for her, I think that really tells you something. And I don't think that she's an F word. Obviously, that's stupid. I mean, she has a lot of typical conservative, Fox News conservatism type politics. But you have to realize another thing, too, that is often overlooked is that Italy, in terms of their system, that is, of course, highly corrupt and fractured, and, coalitions don't last, and people, have to pay off certain entities to get power, like, Berlusconi did. In Italy, when it comes to regional politics, when it comes to representation among the different provinces, the different districts, I think they still, provincia. They when it comes to actual electoral politics, unlike places in North America, or even places like Germany, or especially Britain, maybe not the UK as a whole, but in Britain, I would say Ireland too. And I will talk about Ireland in the Patreon portion a little bit. There is a much better representation of people than there is in most other places in the West, because Italy is an intensely regional country in terms of population distribution. Italy is almost apart from Rome, Italy is a very decentralized place in terms of their per capita population spread. Italy is a very regional country. So you can have different groups doing their own thing. And there is Rome. There is, Florence and Milan and like the bigger northern cities. But a lot of the times, it's not like in North America, especially, where there is these huge megacities. There's these ultra megapolises that have basically nominally all political power because of their population, because of their liberalizing force in terms of how cities just naturally attract a certain class of like thinkers, or they always attract merchant classes that bring about new ideas from different places that always sort of like, liberalize faster. There's something about like the urbanite existence that, as much as I shouldn't be knocking urbanites too hard, as much as I shouldn't LARP as like, trad, cottage core, whatever, I think that it is true that there is a lot of potential in the cities, but cities also bring about it, advanced forms of liberty not seen before for a reason. There's something about living as an urbanite among all those people that tends to inhibit certain strains of political thinking. And I think this is obvious. But at the same time, this is more obvious in North America. In Canada, the reason we are the way we are is because we're basically dominated by 3 or 4 big cities. Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, to a lesser extent, Calgary. Well, I mean, Ottawa, of course, but, let's say, for argument's sake, Toronto. Like Toronto is essentially a city-state in Ontario. That's the way it works. Quebec is much the same with Montreal. And, especially, British Columbia with Vancouver. So I think that you can have a more effective populism in a place like Italy, where the population is dispersed among every region of Italy. And I think that it's a much greater sample of the direction in which things are going than you can gauge in, say, a place like in North America, where, Canada and America are dominated by these huge megacities. And I think that there's also less of a divide, because Italy, in some ways, is a very divided place, very incredibly divided, but it's not divided in the same way that things are dividing in North America and in Britain in the Anglosphere. Italy, they don't have the same sort of they do have a classism, the North and the South. And the South is always looked down upon as the peasantry. But, Italy, they're very, Italians were very, skeptical of one another. Very if we don't hate each other's province, we hate each other's, region. It's those Polantones in the North, or we'll hate the guy across the street if we're not hating, the other town, which is a stone throw away. It's very funny when Italians squabble among each other. But that being said, I think that the fact that such a divided nation among geography, among various haplogroup admixtures, among various class divides, in a regional context, it is very telling that she won. And I think that there is some hope. I think that even though initially she's supportive of the blue-yellow thing, I think that, if she starts talks with Salvini, I think they're going to become much more Eurosceptical, hopefully, and much more skeptical of the largely American-driven absolute civilizational death spiral in confronting that power in the East, without getting too explicit. I think that there is, in some ways, hope for Italy. I think that it's interesting how Italy, above places like Germany, will potentially lead the way. I think that true change, I forget where I said this. I think I said this with, last week I was either with Prudentialist or I was with someone else. I said that France would probably lead the way in terms of a rightist politics. Who was I talking with? We were talking about how the sort of skepticism of America would have to switch to a rightist skepticism of America. Was it a Twitter space, actually? Was it a Twitter space? It may have been a Twitter space. Let me think. Where we were talking about, or it may have been a private conversation I had with someone. I said that there has to be a sort of a right-leaning version of anti-Americanism that I think can only be led by the French. And I think that the French New Right has an ability, I think. If things really go bad, if there is a brutal winter followed by an economic downturn in 2023, and Macron's reign of power is questioned, I think that you will have figures like Zemmour that will create the basis of a rightist version of anti-Americanism and anti-globalization. And I think that those are quite promising, but only a country like France, who has usually the most revolutionary and, ironically enough, paradoxically, the most restorative fringio politics. I think that unfortunately right now that vision is impossible the way things are. That vision is complicated. But I think Italy and France definitely have a hope. Maybe not Spain. They say Spain is a lib. But I know BAP was talking about how in Lisbon there is sort of like this globalist free zone where radicals of all sorts can go and propagate, and you could do very interesting things in Lisbon, in Portugal. I think that the Mediterranean and adjacent places like France can lead the way for a sort of restorationist politics that resists the absolute domination of America. And I think that it's interesting how places like in the Anglosphere, Ireland, the UK, well, especially Ireland, I really upset the Paddies a few weeks ago when the Queen died. I'm not going to go into it. I know I have Irish listeners and followers, but I think that when you look at the state of Ireland, you look at the state of Italy, I mean, there's a huge contrast there. The fact that Catholicism, for instance, is truly still a felt thing. It truly is almost like a genetic religion to us Italians. The fact that it wasn't treated as an identity issue the way that it was in Ireland during the Troubles. That they clung on to their Catholicism just to get at the Protestants, right? Just to get at the English. I think it really says something. I think that there's still a hope for the Catholic Church in Italy. At least I think so. But, Georgia, she really addresses the issues that are facing Italy. Georgia Meloni, she really even outright comes and says it, that there needs to be an awareness of the demographics of Italy. There no longer are there huge Mediterranean families. And that's a shame. Even here in the diaspora, all of the, I live in like basically a little Italy here in the Niagara region, not to give out my location, but you probably know where. They're all in retirement homes. They're really, it's all these new immigrants or all these people that are moving here from Toronto because the housing prices in Toronto are, unlivable. Younger people are priced out of the market. So this is why I must find an Italian, or at least a Mediterranean woman. I don't know if I have one in mind, but no, I'll say no more. Say no more. The point being is that there really needs to be a change, and I think that the Italian people realize they need to reclaim themselves. And this isn't like a LARP fest because, again, I do believe that there is immense hurdles to the vision that at least, Meloni is giving a voice to. I think that there is going to be a lot of growing pains into an alternative vision for most populist movements, or even not just populist, but even like aristocratic rightist movements in Europe. I think that they have a better opportunity in terms of their identity and knowing who they are than us in North America. There must be different strategies in North America because we simply deal with a different situation. So I hope for the future, and even in Canada, in some ways I agree. There was a tweet by my good friend, Kevin Michael Grace, who maybe will come on the show one day. He said, really maybe I should just vote for Charest as a party member because it's like the accelerationist pill, where it's like if Charest gets in, then nobody has this false hope of palavra, like, restoring things and returning, and palavra is going to be the greatest. And no, I think that, I was tempted to do that as well. But I think that in terms of the pragmatic situation of the things that we're going to face as Canadians in the coming years, I think that there really is an opportunity for the conservative parties to have a good, hard, long look at themselves and to truly present an alternative vision to Justin's Liberals. I say Justin's liberals because, whatever you want to say about Chrétien, I think that Chrétien, he really was like kind of a decent leader. He really did sort of steer the ship in a way that wasn't too radical, that was prudent. He didn't get us involved in the Iraq war. He was right about that. Yeah, I mean, financially, he had to there was some corruption here and there. He had to buy a few votes here and there in Quebec, which, I mean, he knew the game. That's just the business of doing politics in Quebec. And that's one good thing about Palaver, is that he is a fluent French speaker, but he comes from Manitoba. So he is outside of the Laurentian elite. He is outside of the Quebec circle, the sort of Quebec, Ottawa, Gatineau circle there, the Laurentian elite. So he's 1 foot in Anglophone Canada and 1 foot in Francophone Canada without being subject to the pull of the Laurentian elite in Canada, in Quebec, in Montreal, and between Montreal and Ottawa. He is much more in line with Stephen Harper's Calgary elite. And, I have criticism of them as well. I think a lot of them, they're neocons, and they're like mushy, like financial liberals. They're, market fundamentalists, but whatever. That's my own gripe I have with the Conservative Party. But I think the Conservative Party, they have an opportunity here. The way that Italy has an opportunity, the way that if things go terribly wrong in Europe next year, I believe France will be that driving engine. So, Viva, no, I'm not going to say it, but, I'm not going to say Viva Meloni, but I think that, I think that there's an opportunity presenting itself, and I hope for the best, even though I am myself terminally black-pilled about everything, but who knows? Maybe reality might upend my expectations, hopefully. I'm praying it does. I'm praying for all of my paisans in Italy. I think that they're moving in the right direction. Having family in Italy, they all feel it as well. They're all quite happy about the result. A lot of my family in Brazil, they're all very happy with Bolsonaro. I think that, again, Bolsonaro, there's certain things I don't agree with. I don't agree with his policy towards the rainforest. I don't agree with his sort of market fundamentalist type of stuff. I think that populist leaders, rightfully so, scare the pants out of the chattering laptop classes. And I think that there truly can be a political revival if the cards are played right, if there is strategic Machiavellian framing behind it, if there are smart people, if there are intelligent frogs that are behind these movements, that are behind these parties, I think that there's a chance. I'm actually more white-pilled when it comes to these countries than I am of North America as a whole. I think that things in Europe, because of Germany and the UK, and to a lesser extent France, and of course like these absolute dunderheads like Borrell, and other like these just hideous ghouls that run the European Union. I think that in NATO, I think that there's a certain spirit in Europe, I think, that is there, without fetishizing it. I think there's a different spirit in North America, but it's one that's complicated. In Europe, it's, I think, much more straightforward, that there's a certain spirit that they can tap into. Because a lot of these people, they still know who they are. And North America presents different challenges. Because I was saying this on Schwab's Space the other day. I said that North America is a land of contradictions. It is something very new, which is the Enlightenment Project, was governments by an Enlightenment Project, by the use of reason, by the use of political theory. But in North America, it's meeting against things that are very ancient, forces that are, very ancient, in a different sense of the ancient world in Europe. Because in Europe, they have an ancient lived history. In North America, they have an ancient sort of subsomatic, energetic history that lays beneath the surface. It's like how people talk about North America is controlled by corn demons and how corn is everywhere. It's an inflammatory thing, and like how the sort of, me and Mianzante, Mytho-American, otherwise known as as Zante. We were talking about this, about the spirits of America have went underground, and there's sort of like a horror and a wonder to them. And I think that in America in particular, and even here in Canada, there are very ancient forces that have not been contended with the way that various churches in Europe have contended with their ancient forces. I truly believe this. And I think that there's an opportunity here, and there is something that lies beneath the surface that is hidden. We talk about 411 incidents and the forest in Europe, the very cultivated, marked by humanity forest, the very inframed forests in Europe as opposed to the wilderness of North America. So America in particular is a land of contradiction. It's something very new meeting something very old. But there are unique challenges to that are cropping up in ways that we can't even fathom. Even just like the fact that there's high fructose corn syrup everywhere. So, I hope for the best, and we'll see what happens. That was called Strong in the Lord of Hosts by Philip Daniel. I wanted to talk about the nature of something that I posted to Telegram that will lead in some ways to the simp question. I wanted to talk about the nature of older women and these sort of the phenomenon of the mommy GF and what I've observed, and how really this phenomenon is what Bronze Age pervert called the longhouse. I really think I should expound upon it. And then maybe I'll get into the media studies thing, where I break down quite a spicy film and a song that's very close to my heart. But the nature of older women and sexuality. Here we go. I just realized that, Mama Meloni, she fits the bill, attractive older woman. She's a pretty blonde, probably bottle blonde, but, that's MILF material. She likes anime. Come on. Hello? That's very far right, liking anime. And people make anime waifus of her that she actually shares on Facebook to the boomers in Italy. That's amazing. So maybe Mama Meloni could be the, she could represent this new, kind of like MAGA MILFs in North America. She could represent this new power block of feminine yet powerful older mothers, kind of like the rad femmes in England, especially, that could, go against the global liberal regime. Maybe she's, who knows? We need the power. We need to harness the power of the right wing mommy. The right wing always loves mommies. I think there was this tweet I was responding to. I think it was what's his name? Aleph, woke 8-year-old. He's been around forever, but he's perpetually locked. Where he deleted this tweet about, like, why are they cheering a woman if the right wing is seen as misogynist? Well, it's very complicated because Italian men are very misogynistic, I gotta say. We are very, especially in Italy, certain parts of Italy, they have, they don't have a lot of boundaries, I hate to say it. But I think that we're very complex in our misogyny, in our objectification of women. We very much have, over the hundreds and even thousands of years, we've also we really perfected the male gaze into a art form, literally. I mean, I think that we love the beauty and the sultriness of women and the nature of the female body. But at the same time, Mediterranean women are very, they can be quite testy because they're dealing with men who are just like horny and perpetually want to find a replacement for mama all the time. Because it's funny, I said to woke 8-year-old, we're the nation of mama's boys, where we have this repulsion towards women, but also this deep needed attraction towards women. Not just in an Oedipalized sense, but Mediterranean women are, they're both extremes. Can be extremely catty and like very forward and very like argumentative, and you catch them the wrong way and it's not good. But at the same time, they can also embody, especially towards their male children, very like warmth and affection, and I would say not bordering. They are enablers. I'm not bordering on enabler, but they are enablers, even to the detriment of their female children, of their daughters, especially Southern Italians. Daughters are like not seen as, I hate to say it, they're not seen as worthy as especially the firstborn son. Yeah, that's the way it is. But so Italian misogyny is quite complex. It's not that there's necessarily a deep hatred of women, but there is like in some ways a resentment, but also a sort of, in some ways, archetypal longing for the beauty of women that can manifest in different ways. But at the same time, a lot of Italian men, especially Southern Italian men, we are mama's boys. We have this thing towards our mothers that they are the source of comfort and protection and enabling, but also you can almost say like there's a borderline Oedipalization when it comes to like finding a woman where like, mama has to approve, and it's you find traits that are kind of similar to your mother. For example, I talked about this, the woman that I fell in love with my whole life since we were little kids. My mother like deeply hates her. She like says she's, she's a pezzente, like she's not good for my son. She comes from a broken home. So yeah, it's very much like Italian misogyny is very complex, but I think that Italian women are just like built different, all Mediterranean women. The dynamic is, I think, very different in Scandinavian countries or among the English. Italian men, we have this like great passion and love and eros and almost like bordering on obsession with women. But then when it comes to the overabundance of that feeling, that can lead to like this very strange, like, in terms of like North American or Anglo standards, very strange, like public displays of like horniness that can be like, almost in North America would be like borderline illegal. I think that, again, I don't endorse this. I do not endorse catcalling or whatever, but I think that, Italian women, a lot of them, not to like generalize, of course, not to say that they all appreciate this, but a lot of like, especially older Italian women, they say, yeah, we appreciate it. Actually, it's like, because Mediterranean women, they're equally as confrontational, and as they almost exhibit a sort of masculine energy. Like, you have to be very sure of yourself to gain the trust and the love of a Mediterranean woman. Very Latin American women, I think, because of the DNA admixture with, various indigenous cultures, they're kind of like Mediterranean women times 10. Like, they have that same, Mediterranean women and Latin American women, you have to like earn your right to love them. So, but it's funny because like Italian men, we are the nation of mama's boys. So it's almost like the feminine and the one end enables us. And in some ways, I don't want to say this about my own culture, my own people, but it's kind of like there is a bit of a longhouse there. But at the same time, Italian men are very passionate about this sort of gaze towards the feminine. So I guess this leads up. So maybe Mama Meloni can like fill that archetype very well. She could become the mama, the sexy mama of the nation, that the ultimate woman for the Italian man, the confident Mediterranean woman who is also mama, but also is, a beautiful older woman. So I don't know. But then I came across this tweet about my mutual Fisher King. He said that, it's funny, don't like be too white pilled, because there's always the reality that she could become colonized by the regime. Because, for example, Ursula von der Leyen, she was marketed as almost like a quasi trad. I think she has like 7 kids or whatever. But now she's like the face of like EU neoliberalism. Rabidly rabidly Russophobic. So don't be fooled. I think, but I don't know. I think that, the Mediterranean woman is much less controllable than perhaps the Germanoid or the Scandinavian woman. I don't know. I mean, a lot of Germanic and Scandinavian women are quite tough, though. They're quite very forthright, especially Germanic women. I quite like German women. I gotta say, a lot of German women are quite appealing, But Mediterranean women, they have a sort of sultriness about them that is different, very different. I think that, they're different than German women, But I think that hopefully Mama Meloni is very, very fiery and strong-headed, and she doesn't let herself get colonized by the, Brussels, City of London, and Washington, globo-liberal regime. One can only hope for the best, but I do express a word of caution. I'm not like fully 100%. Yeah, I'm like, I'm Mama Meloni's strongest soldier. I'm not, I think same in the way that I'm not Palavra's strongest soldier. I think that you have to be prudent about these things, even though like the memes and the anime representations of her are quite based. She's a fan of Tolkien. She's like a fantasy Tolkienite LARPer. That the Wikipedia page I posted on Twitter, and this tweet's doing a bit of numbers about like how they're saying, well, it's tradition in Italian politics that the far right loves fantasy. And Italian futurism, great literature, of course, that's very far right, liking J.R. Tolkien is far right. So, that's pretty. What's funny? I like to kayfabe. It is far right. Let's face it. The left is more correct. The woke is more correct than the moderate, in the sense that you can kayfabe it, but it's true. Like there is something there. There's something there. It's funny. The left has their own version of fantasy that is like ultra inclusive and like borderline communist. They love all the cape stuff. They love Star Trek. Star Trek really is kind of like what the especially Picard is like what the global liberal order like really wants for us. There are other like works of I would say fantasy, or what they call soft sci-fi, that you can say is quite liberal. Not even liberal, but quite like, feminist or quite progressive, especially when it comes to gender issues. Like I'm thinking of like Ursula K. Le Guin. Yeah, I'm a fan of her writing. I'm a fan of what's that book called? Is it called In Darkness? But the one the one town that had the boy that they kept in a state of terrible abandonment and neglect to maintain the harmony of the town. That was a great work. That was the town of Old. What's it called? It had a weird name to it. But Ursula Le Guin, her books are considered like soft sci-fi, and has like borderline progressive narratives. The left hand of darkness. That's the work I read. I read it many moons ago, but it's it's a very important literary work in sci-fi and what they call soft sci-fi, which I don't exactly agree with that. But she has quite a bit of a lot of based stuff in there. She loves Taoism and Carl Jung and stuff like that. I mean, I wouldn't say that she would be like a Petersonian or anything nowadays, but I mean, she died in 2018. I wonder what she thought about Jordan Peterson. But I mean, The Left Hand of Darkness is quite a monumental work, and even though it explores like androgyny and so forth, there is quite a bit of good meat to it. So, sorry, I was thinking of the Ursula K. Le Guin short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omilas. That was a great story. That presents a very interesting moral dilemma. Anyways, it's about this town that subjugates this boy, and in order to like restore the perfection of the town, it's sort of like the ultimate display of the Gerardian scapegoat, sacrifice victim. And yeah, it's a great story. But anyways, moving on. So there was I have a certain experiences, not of the relationship variety, but I've certainly become accustomed in some sense to the friendship and desires of certain older women. I said this before. I think that the woman I grew up with, she was older, maybe not in terms of age, but in terms of temperament. And various women throughout my life I've sort of been fond of. I code them either as older than me or more mature than me or even numerically older than me. And who knows, right? Maybe the power of the mommy GF is quite strong. But I said this on this Telegram post because for those of you who don't know, please follow me, Telegram/Jenner Productions. I post my more spicier rants there, and I post longer form rants there. It's sort of like Telegram, okay. Twitter is the sketch, the basic, quick sketch of ideas. At least I try to treat it as such. Telegram is like the in-between. It's like those short, like, thought pieces that I just have on my mind that I get out there quite quickly, my little rants. And then, hopefully articles become this long-form thing. I'm much better at long-form, I think. I've always naturally... I tried to do the blog post thing, where it's like you write a blog, and you do it frequently. But I can't do that. Just something about it. I have to, like, go over the 7-pager mark, I have to at least 10 to 12 to 20 pages, or even sometimes 30 to 70 pages in some respects, but I can never seem to do it. Anyways, so before I go into my rant, I can't, because it's recent at the time of recording, let me deconstruct this tweet by this hideous ghoul, really, that I despise. This Daily Beast writer. What is that word that Morgoth calls them? Skintellectual, I think. Anyways, this is from CNN. This article: Giorgina Meloni is set to be the Italy's most far-right prime minister since my man Benny M. So this person, I really hate. I can't stress enough. I mean, the terrible takes. I mean, this person is really one of the worst offenders. Senior fellow at what is that? Western State Center. Yeah, probably some think tank. But oh my God, this tweet. But I say this tweet. I'm suffering for you by saying by reviewing this tweet. Because it illustrates a good point about the nature of older women when it comes to at least the political implications, but I would say the cultural and even spiritual implications on the political right. I think older women have a very complicated relationship to the political right. In a way, I think that she represents, in a way, the more productive aspect of the older woman, the crone, if you will, the mother, than the longhouse ideal, which I will get into when I talk, my topic about, the nature of older women and sexuality and the mommy GF and so forth. So, Wajahat Ali, I am butchering the name, but I of course don't care. If it was someone I respected, I would focus more on the pronunciation, but I really don't care. Wajahad Ali says, the right wing will use women, especially mothers, to soften the branding of their authoritarian agenda. Oh, you mean like all those mothers of the certain children that they subject to their ideological social experimentation, not to name names for YouTube purposes? What about them? Do they soften the blow, the woke mother? Anyways, to soften the branding of their authoritarian agenda, experts on F-wordism have warned about this. And this leader of the Gaia Initiative, Elizabeth C. McLaughlin, quote tweeted, saying, gender washing, become familiar with the term, linking to a TNF online. What is that? Taylor and... what's that? The academic publishing, Taylor and Francis online. Gender washing, the myth of equality. More here. This has been a strategy of disinformation for a long time. Like, you could just imagine, like, the lard clogging the sort of hormonal imbalance. What's that thing that the lymphatic the lymph node inflammation. You could just, just hear it in that tone of voice. That the tweet physiognomy. You could just Anyways, this is a really fascinating tweet because really. Oh, yes, this is quite the crone, the dead-eyed crone. Oh, I can't even look at her face. I can't. It's really quite, if you want to talk about, like, the face of the childless, Simpaku-eyed. Anyways, I'm not listen, for YouTube purposes, I'm not targeting anybody. Listen, I'm not, anyways, well, hopefully, I say this for purely educational reasons, this critique. The thing is, though, the mother represents something quite fascinating when it comes to right-wing politics. The older woman has a role in the right wing, but is to provide a sort of guidance and leadership role of vitalistic power. She is a mother of the nation. She is a mother that guides, a mother that in her older years provides wisdom. So, unlike certain forms of the right wing, there is a place for the older woman that isn't this oppressive longhouse mama that sort of disempowers the role of her children, her male children. There is the difference between the longhouse ideal of the crone that is embraced by the political left, the hideous hag, that oppresses her young ones, that squanders and wastes the potential of her vitalistic young male children. Rather, the mother to the right wing has a role of, in traditional societies, of empowering her younger children, especially her younger male children, and guiding them towards greatness by setting up a good example. Because mother figures, even in traditional societies, have immense power over the home and have a sort of duty to the family. But the family also has a duty towards her. And Italy, I think, is a culture with a perfect example of this. And I think that the reason that Mama Meloni empowers the family life and says that it needs to be preserved is because of this. I think that the right wing, rather than chiding older women, and this is just my opinion, maybe it's my simp brain, but the right wing should really empower older women to fulfill these roles, to mature into their age, to become a source of a meaning and the glue that holds a family together, the way that mothers always were. And even when mothers are older, when their children grow up, they still have a role to impart wisdom upon, the grandchildren and so forth, and to still be that rock, that matriarch upon the family hearth. So, for example, in the depictions in Greek mythology of Andromache by Euripides, and even in the Iliad, there is a profound role for Andromache as a wife, as a mother. She gives her husband Hector military advice, somewhat breaching tradition, but she is a very wise woman. Her role as a mother is very important. There's this one scene where Hector takes her baby son, Astyanax, I believe, I'm butchering the pronunciation, and takes him away from the suitors, what do they call it, the midwives, and gives him back to Andromache. So her role is symbolically shown as the mother that guides her husband. And of course, when Hector, when he dies, she goes into a state of great mourning in Euripides, the Trojan women. And then, of course, she was given to, I believe, Agamemnon's son as a form of concubinage. But the point being is that the mother is a guide, is of great profound importance. And of course, the conceit of these leftoids is always, oh my God, I can't believe these women, they're being used as props to vote against their own interests, and the far right that hates women. It's like, well, no. It's that there is a form of proper femininity and proper masculinity that is expressed, at least in the majority of right-wing politics. I think that's the whole point. And women can identify with that. And clearly, the example of Mama Meloni, she's obviously fighting for her interests as a mother against the diseased forms of progressive, internationalist ideology that wishes to squander the family that is the nation. And if that's F-wordism, I'm sorry, but whatever. The whole Umberto Eco essay, the cult of tradition, that's in play here. It's funny because the other day before this electoral victory in Italy, I believe it was the New Statesman that was pumping up that Sophie Lewis ghoul again in her hideous anti-family book, which maybe I might hate review one day, called Full Surrogacy Now. It's literally, if you had to take what the global liberal order wants to do, what the radical liberal order wants to do to all society, wants to do to every human being on the planet, wants to do to civilization itself, then just read that book. Maybe I'll do it for Giant Reviews. I'll have to subject myself to terrible agony by reading through her book. So, yeah, that'll maybe, I don't know. I'm not making any promises. Literally, it would be void staring, the likes of which you've never seen before. But anyways, moving on. That one was called "Then Let Me on the Mountaintop" by Philip Daniel. I really like that track. So this next, I guess, part of the episode, finally getting into the mommy GF. Now, at the risk of being a bit too vulnerable, let me go into what provoked my thoughts around it. Well, two things, actually. I was talking for a little bit with a family friend who happens to be one of these, single older women, that likes the attention of younger men, that, I'll get into that. Nothing between us, but that, we would go on talking about life and so forth for a very long time. And another thing, too, is I had a dream after meeting this person again. And it really it crystallized a lot of my thinking around this issue. I had this dream and I actually wrote it down. I write down quite a few of my dreams. I'm in the process of organizing some of the better ones and perhaps releasing them in my Substack. So this dream I talked a little bit about on my Telegram channel, telegram.com/generaproductions. Please go and follow me. I need to make at least, I would like to get over 1,000 on that one, in case the worst happens, knock on wood. I was in this dream. There was a first part to it, but that part isn't as significant as the second part. I was in this hotel room. I was in this hotel, and I was with this older blonde woman. And PSA, what do they call that? Content warning. This was quite a sexually charged dream. And I was sort of like I would say like a almost childlike role. We're in this dark room in this huge bed. And I'll spare you like the graphic details. But I was basically, it was almost, I hate to say it, Oedipalized. And she was sort of like, not paying attention to me, but then she did, and then she consented. And it was in my dream, it was sort of like, I could almost feel like this older blonde woman was sort of like a mother figure in a sense, but engaged in this sort of, sexual edging, if you will. And then during the process of engaging, if you know what I mean, she starts to transform into this younger woman with this short jet black hair that's sort of like slicked back. And, we ended up engaging in, a bit of the dance, if you will. And it was really weird. It was one of those sort of the anima transforms, to use the Jungian lingo rather than the Freudian. And at the end, she kind of was like this, I guess you could say, girl boss figure, but I could tell that she was a bit younger than me. And she, I also vividly remember her face and her body. She looked like this nude model that I used to draw. And she leaves. She has like these Doc Marten boots, these like black pants, And it was sort of like, I remember it was around, I think, Christmas time in the dream. There was like this hotel, but it opens up to a lobby. It's like one of these huge halls that you'd find in a mall. I think it was kind of like a mall. It was really weird. I think there was also a book sale in this other room, going into our bedroom. It was quite strange because my dreams, they happen in different scenes and sometimes they don't relate to each other. But I remember thinking about this dream, and it was one of those like very vivid dreams that you have where you sort of, you sort of reflect upon them, you wake up and it really hits you. And there's an urge inside of yourself just to write them down or to type them out. And I remember having this dream, and I remember walking down this hallway with this very like plastered smile on my face. But it was almost like a bittersweet feeling because I remember in the dream I would never see this woman again who transformed during our act of union. And I remember feeling this somber sort of feeling. And then I woke up and the dream ended. I was going back to my car, I think, or some car park or whatever. And that really hit me. It hit me in the sense of my whole life, I've sort of been after the sort of mommy GF archetype. Because, and then I said in this post on Telegram that, it came to me in a dream, what facts do you have for this? Oh, it came to me in a dream. It literally came to me in a dream. What Jung called the great dream. That really, the mommy GF ideal is a longhouse ideal. Because as a man in a relationship, not that I would know, I've never been in one. I mean, don't take my word for it, even though I don't know why over the years, I've said this before, people just randomly ask me for relationship advice. I'm like, why are you asking me about this? And they're like, oh, because you're an objective observer and, you have good advice, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but Just, word of warning, I don't truly know, But the point being is that my whole life I've sort of been surrounded by figures that I've either placed as being older than me in temporality, like this one girl that I grew up with that I fell in love with, but for a variety of reasons would never work out, and legitimately older women. But I think that as a man, you have to transcend that in a way, because that very is a longhouse ideal. That is an ideal of always seeking mommy, always, because all men want mommy. It's funny. I love the one part in the E-Girl documentary where my good friend Crooner, the way he delivers it and sort of like his precocious, like the way that he explains things, I like the delivery he has is very like, it's filled with wonder, everything. And the way he said it, where he's like, but that's the thing, all men want mommy. And it's like, the way he said it, I don't know why it was funny. All men want mommy. It's true, we want mommy Lana, right? Like, that's the thing. All men want mommy, all women want daddy. But I think that it's less damaging, I feel, that in a way, a man, like, okay, a woman can seek an older male figure, and in a lot of ways, nature backs this up, because the primary years of a man is when he enters, when he is established, when he has more maturity. They say that now that I'm turning 30 in December, that this Gio, don't worry about it. This is your prime years, You just need a Zoomer top Sadie now. Like, oh man, Zoomer top Sadie. But I think that it's true that it's much less damaging, I feel, for a woman to seek the comfort of an older man. Not like really old. I mean, like, a man who at least has a maturity and who is established in themselves to handle a more serious relationship, a marriage, more or less. And who can handle the responsibility of not just, financially, but emotionally, the responsibility of having a wife and children. But a woman, that in some ways is backed up by just the nature of it. A woman and this is an article recently that my good friend Mary Harrington, who I will get on the podcast one day, she had this article about the sexualization of older women and how older women don't want to feel like insecure, even though it's so-called, quote unquote, liberating, the whole MILF thing, the mommy GF thing. But really that relationship holds you back, because it's more natural for a woman to feel a sort of sense that the men around her age are not that established and not that mature and not that ready for a serious commitment. But an older man, like at least partially older, is ready for those obligations. But when a man seeketh an older woman, especially a woman who cannot have children, especially a woman who has already been around the block, who has sort of already been established, but, for whatever reason, wants to feel young again or whatever, then that relationship ultimately is not very conducive to the personal growth of a man. And this is a very bitter black pill that I've had to swallow. Because a man seeketh comfort, and a man will seeketh, a number of things from a woman. But a man has to, in some ways, fight that temptation to seek what they perceive as an easy arrangement in a mother figure, right? A man has to grow by taking on the responsibility of a relationship with a woman, even, especially a woman who is at least partially younger than them. But a mommy GF has none of these attributes. You don't grow together, because they will always mommy you. They will always treat you not as a source of like respect or commitment or whatever, but they will inevitably fall into the role of the mother. They will inevitably start to treat you as if you were their son. And this is not good, because the moment that there is any friction in the relationship, either they will move on or they will just treat you as a mother. And women hate that, by the way. Women, they, from what I've been told anyways, they don't want a man who who seeks a mommy. They want you to be a man that emotionally supports them, not someone who needs emotional support. Because as a man, you have to give support to a wife and your children. And so a mother can be, a woman can have license to be more emotionally vulnerable and to express that vulnerability because they are ultimately, archetypally, the nurturers. And a man can express emotions to women when it matters. But a man who always expresses their emotions and their deep inner feelings and their deep inner sort of, how shall I put this, vulnerabilities, the way that we do with, male friendship, that doesn't work. A woman, I know that Dave Distributus was talking about this on his channel recently, a few weeks ago, how a woman, they will feel that you are emotionally vulnerable and that you aren't up to being a provider or to take care of them. And it's not that they have this like Machiavellian, like lizard brain response to it. It's more that you are giving them, what did Distributus say? He said that women will feel insecure because you are providing them with information that they can't help you with. It's your job to fix that. Not fix that in so many cold calculating terminology, but rather to reconcile these problems. You have to be that source of strength and that source of commitment. But a mommy GF complicates this relationship because a man seeketh what a woman seeketh in a man in them, right? To be a nurturer, to baby them in a sense. That's never going to work. That will only enable your worst attributes as a man. You will never grow in that relationship. You will never become a flourishing being. You will always be resigned to the position of a little man-child. And I hate to say it, but a lot of older women, especially childless older women, who seeks relationships with young men, that's what they're looking for. Because in their minds, they can control a younger man better. And in their minds, they can control you, and they could also seek validation in their own beauty. Women like that, I hate to say it, a lot of them are immature. A lot of childless older women, and I don't say this hatefully, I'm saying that this is what I've observed with childless older women who are close to me, and I'm not knocking them because they can have quite positive attributes in some sense. The wine ant can provide you with certain things, certain insights into female nature that you wouldn't otherwise have, because younger women or women your age, they play a game, right? They have to. That's their survival instinct to find the most optimal partner. Not, and even the ones that don't. I'll have a little blurb about promiscuous women as well in this. So, older women that are childless that seek younger men, they are looking for that replacement for a child instinctually. They're not. They don't even have a conscious thing about it. This operates on the unconscious level. So a man in that relationship does not have the same degree of flourishing or responsibility. So they'll always baby you, and they'll always try to provide you with, men who seeketh older women. They think that also sexually, that they are more down, that they're more, they're easygoing, and they're more willing to cater to you. And initially, they will be more willing to cater to you. They will. They won't have the same resistances that younger women have to filling out your, coon brain fantasies. But that being said, that's not necessarily good, though. That won't make you a better lover. That will just enable you, in a way. And also, it's kind of not true, by the way. Older women are still women. They still have limitations. They still have dignity. They still have a sense of respect, even though that to attract a younger man, they think that by, I have seen this with my own eyes, they will, put out more, for lack of a better term, to attract the eye of younger men. And younger men will expect that. And so this sort of like older MILF ideal is really a porn fantasy. Really. Even though it may have some basis in truth. That's not a relationship that will really, highlight the positives in your own character. So the mommy GF, in a way, is a longhouse, because they not only inhibit you as a man, they don't let you grow. Because by definition, you can't have children in that relationship. You can't, as a man, take on certain responsibilities that provoke your transformation into adulthood, into being truly a man, right? What is a man? Is a man just having sex? Then you achieve manhood? I often struggle with this myself, as being some kind of like, wizard Chan, whatever, that you're not a man. You question your own masculinity, right? Because, of course, attracting women is a huge part of heterosexual masculinity. But that being said, to be a man is to take on, I think, responsibility, is to sacrifice, is to, in some ways, viciously interrogate. This is something Matthew told me once, Matthew the Stout, my BFF for life. He said, in some ways, being a man means you have to viciously interrogate yourself and you have to sacrifice certain negative attributes of yourself for the higher good. And so sacrifice, commitment, fulfilling a project, that is, I think, what makes a man. And I fully admit that I'm probably not there. I'm getting there, but I'm not there, right? And of course, having sex is probably, well, never mind. Anyways, I'm just gonna blackpill myself. But being a man requires these things, and being a man requires that you take on these responsibilities, and you sacrifice parts of yourself for the people around you that you love, and for the things around you that you truly love on a deeper level, on the level of your soul. Not that I love my good car, I love my material possessions. You love the project that you're fulfilling. That is what I mean by higher love. You are obliged to the Lord to make the best of yourself, irregardless of the circumstances, like what I've talked about earlier in this talk about the nature of destiny. So the mommy GF cannot give you these things the way that a younger woman can give you these things. Not that they give you these things, but rather you can engage in a level of a mutual relationship. The mommy GF cannot do this because the mommy GF is the longhouse mother. She will, sort of put a thumb down on you, and in turn you will be enabled. But there is a price for all things in life. There is a price for thinking that the mommy GF can give you what younger women cannot. Everything has a balance, everything in order. And so I think that the problem is really that as a man, we are, in this sort of psychopolitical, image-driven epoch that drives us towards certain things. And pornography, in a lot of ways, is psychopolitical. It's a pure entity of psychopolitics. It is the transparency society. It is your inner desires becoming, you could say in the Freudian sense, Oedipalized, but it's becoming rendered transparent inside and outside. Not to say that everyone who seeks an older woman is a fetishist, but I'm saying that the fetish over the mommy GF is quite powerful. So let me read you an article in Unheard. And, Unheard, they always have a mixed bag of things. And this person is a feminist that is writing about a certain film. She's talking about the Nancy Jo Sales expose where she falls in love with a younger man. I quite like Nancy Jo Sales. I read her book about young women. Quite good. Zoe Strimple is a historian of gender and intimacy in modern Britain, a columnist for the Sunday Telegraph. Her latest book is Seeking Love in Modern Britain, Gender Dating and the Rise of the Single. Maybe I have her on the show. I think she's friends with Mary Harrington, so... yeah. I've read some of her articles. She's all right. I mean, you take what you will. I think that in this article, there's a lot of conclusions that I wouldn't make. But anyway, so here is the article. Let's start from the middle. Now, however, the middle-aged woman becomes a prime target for younger men, not only for sex, but in some rare cases, for relationships too. Sales have never troubled getting matches on Tinder. Nancy Jo Sales, the writer. Kate Beckinsale, high-profile women, was caught kissing 21-year-old comedian Matt Rife. At 45, she dated 25-year-old comedian Pete Davidson. Oh, is that Madonna dating that Davidson fellow? I don't know. He looks like a bug man, but anyways. Why have young men switched the focus of their sexual energy on middle-aged women? The most obvious example, or explanation, is that life is imitating pornography, where MILF, Mother I'd Like to F, has seen a stratospheric rise. In 2018, MILF porn was the third most searched category. As sales rates, this is part thanks to the megastorm of Lisa Ann. Oh no, Lisa Ann! The 49-year-old actress who became the world's most famous MILF after the 2008 satirical video about Sarah Palin, Who's Nailin' Palin. Lisa Ann, very unique American physiognomy, that, by the way, that American MILF. The MAGA MILF is a uniquely North American phenomenon. It's like Bap talks about older women in Argentina, how they have the body of a 20-year-old, but then you look at them, they have the face of a 50-year-old. So very, very interesting. There is, of course, something empowering, even thrilling, in the age reversal. The sudden realization that being a woman in your late 30s, 40s, or 50s does not mean sexual invisibility, but rather the opposite. It was only the swinging I was getting addicted to with the attention of all the exciting young men, Sales writes. But when I interviewed her recently for a radio documentary I'm making about singleness, maybe she should talk to me, the only true cell in the podcast circuit. Giant Geo, right here. Maybe she should interview me. I'm making about singleness. He was keen to stress that however many young men were desperate for sex with her, the experience should be seen in terms of an overarching misogyny, of course. And this is the problem with a lot of the post-left feminists, is that they don't look at it from the perspective of it hindering men, but rather from the perspective of it is being objectifying and misogynistic. So, oh my God, this is Louise Perry wrote an article. Why do men love beaches? Oh my God. Oh man, I should read that one. The example offered in Nothing Personal certainly chronicle some appalling behavior, from the rude to the threatening. I'm thinking we do a few tequila shots. I could do some other things. Bend you over listening to Zeppelin on vinyl. And even worse, desires, including for RP simulation, clearly influenced by porn. Older women have many obvious attractions. They're more likely to be confident and solvent, for instance, but the MILF idea thrives because it links a kind of power play integration to BDSM, which has become one of the most popular genres of sex. Older women are more likely to initiate a kink mad era in which the more transgressive something is better. This role reversal no longer seems to challenge traditional masculinity. Instead, it simply shifts into the category of hot. No, I disagree totally. It distorts traditional masculinity because you as a man are not in charge of that relationship. So I would say that that's a fault of this article. The MILF figure also caters to complexities born out of the chaotic conditions, contemporary erotic romantic landscape. Justin Leimiller, who has researched the sexual fantasies of American men, found that men keen on porn on MILF often suffer from relationship and attachment anxieties. Yes, I agree. And see a sexualized maternal figure as a source of comfort. Quote, they're worried that their partner might leave them and they need quite a lot of reassurance. Again, this is what I mean by the longhouse ideal. Most young men on dating apps do not appear to be thirsting for a partner, but for men frightened of sexual rejection, which can be immediate, it's not hard to see why then older women, especially a mother, might seem more sympathetic and more attractive. When it comes to men their own age, then, younger women seem to be drawn to short straw sexually. Older men still prefer younger women. Their relative immaturity and inexperience seem to be held against them, and they are perceived to be as more likely to put the pressure on long-term commitment. So not to read the whole article, you should read it for yourself, but let's read the conclusion. Flexibility and ability to move frictionlessly through the world has come to be prized in all areas of life. See, again, this is the, expertism. This is the seamlessness of the entrepreneur that Byung-Chul Han talks about in Psychopolitics. This is just refinement culture as applied to dating. And of course, older women, they are refined. So in this sense, it suits the MILF as much as the younger man. Many 50-something women, including Nancy Jo Sales, are busy with parenting commitments and demanding jobs. Young whippersnappers who can deliver sex on a plate or nothing and nothing more might therefore be appealing. So again, go and read this article. Let me, I really should read that Louise Perry article. Maybe I get her on the show as well. I know we follow each other on Twitter. So, why do men love bad B words? Maybe I'll read it for another time. Maybe that could be a content-minded extra. Who knows? But yeah. So I think that this article, I think, touches upon a truth that the older woman is seen as more available and seen as more proficient and with less drama than the younger woman. But the thing is, as much as we knock drama, you have to realize that drama is there for a reason. That to deal with the machinations of younger women is just, I think, a passage in life that men have to go through in order to become better lovers and then eventually better fathers. So, that's the thing. This whole thing around younger women being more conducive to the demands of what men are going through, I think that it's never... The problem is that I think, it goes to the fallenness of the modern world in a sense. That the thing is, we have to reconcile that, yes, we live in an incredibly broken time, and men especially are incredibly broken. We live in very fallen times. But you have to pick yourself up in some ways. Not in like this weird, neoliberal self-help maximizing Jordan Peterson way. I mean that in some ways, if you take on the responsibilities of a much more older form of masculinity, you can't just have the benefits of that as well. You can't just say to women that, I'm in command, I'm in charge, but, that comes with responsibilities. And this is what I've always said, that trad women that LARP as trad cottagecore, they will be harsher on men than any third wave feminist. They have much more expectations of men. They're much more, in a way, the intersection between the trad wife cottagecore and the, turf second waver rad femme. I mean, that correlation is strong, because they both have expectations of men that I think in some ways I can see are kind of like unrealistic given the state of masculinity and the way that men are nowadays. There was this thread, I think her name is, we mentioned this, me and Prudentialist. I think her, Dave Distributus mentioned this, the Freya woman on Twitter, about, younger women that can't find good men, even though they're maybe like 5 out of 10. And it's funny because Zero H.P. Lovecraft, my good friend, who will be uncontent-minded, he said, just send your friends to Geo. And he added me, he's like, send your friends to Geo. And I think that, as much as the concerns of younger women are valid, I think, in defining good men and how there are sort of like quasi-fem cells that can't find good partners, I think that in a way, it's unrealistic to expect the younger man to conform to the standards of an older world. But that being said, we're trying to build something more meaningful. If you want those standards of an older world, both men and women, then you have to fight for them. And I think that the reason that younger men are seeking solace in older women is because they think it's easier, but also because older women provide something that I think younger women, I don't want to knock all of them, of course, I'm not generalizing, but I'm saying a lot of younger women do not possess these nurturing instincts. They don't possess the sort of, the desire for men, the sort of love of men that is often talked about by more traditional-minded women. They don't possess the sort of like, how shall I put this? The forgivingness towards the foibles and follies of men that women in an older generation possessed. And I think it's very much a turnoff for younger men to, be always criticized and always looked down upon by the girl boss archetype. And so naturally they go towards older women. And older women, even though they're only getting this validation by seeking younger men, and even though that relationship does not, is probably not for the best for in terms of the perspective of younger men, there is some kind of filial love there. There is some kind of commitment. So what I observed in older women is that a lot of them, I feel, are deeply needy if they don't have family life or children. And a lot of them, they sort of, not only do they seek, how shall I put this, validation, but they sort of seek an emotional attachment in the idea that they can still be involved in the sort of honeymoon phase of a relationship. They can still seek that love high, if you will. And a lot of them, there's something quite interesting about them, especially if they've kept their looks up. But at the end of the day, there's a sadness in them. There's a sadness that life has passed them by, in a sense. And so when a woman has not matured into an older form, into a phase where their own femininity transforms into the maiden, from the maiden to the mother to the crone, and they all have their own equal amounts of worth, then they always naturally capitulate to trying to become the maiden forever. And I think that, unfortunately, this does not fulfill them. That is not conducive to their own, flourishing in life at an older age. So one time I was talking to this friend of mine who is an older woman, and we stayed up quite late one night. We were talking. We were just talking, though. I am true, sir. I'm not joking. I contemplate. Never mind. We were one night and we were talking about her life and so forth, and she always had a string of affairs with younger men, never got married, was a school teacher, and we were talking about why she falls into these situations with these men who seem to stick around for a little bit but then move on, and she sort of tolerates their almost quasi-sexual exploitation of her. And I said to her once, a lot of these older women, a lot of these sort of more promiscuous older women, they have a sort of... I was talking to a friend once about older, not just older women, but not necessarily, but promiscuous women in general. How some of them have this sort of, the trope, the prostitute with a heart of gold sort of deal. A lot of them, they can come off as very worldly. Well, obviously, they can come off as you could almost mistake it for wisdom. The way that they can, in some ways, take on a pantomime of a quasi-maternal figure. I've known a few women like this in my lifetime where, I guess because when you're, less than conventionally attractive man, whatever, when there's, barriers between you and, fulfilling certain desires, they can almost in a way trust you as sort of like, I don't know, what would you call it? You can develop a sort of a good rapport with women, and you could talk to them and so forth, and they can express things to you that they wouldn't express to other men. And a lot of them, they can come out having what you would mistake for wisdom in some ways. You could say they can almost have a sort of a pantomime of a nurturing figure, the way they can, give you advice, and it's like, Gio, you have to do this, and I live this lifestyle and so forth. And you can confuse it in some respects for a form of worldliness, and they can generally do offer you an insight into the experiences of certain women. But, behind that is always a conceit of this sort of depressive character. It's always sort of resentment of, well, I don't want to be with a guy who actually respects me because I don't respect myself, sort of deal. And they actually secretly, loathe men that treat them with any sort of dignity. I hate to say it. This is a generalization. I'm not saying all women are like this, but it tends to be the promiscuous women. They have a sort of a self-loathing character, I've noticed over the years. So this one woman, we were talking, and I basically told her straight up, I go, well, you give these men a piece of yourself because you're essentially fooling yourself into thinking that they respect a side of yourself that you may respect, but they don't. Because to them, without coming out and saying that you're an easy lay, I was basically trying to say that, you can never truly come to terms with, and a lot of these men were younger than her, obviously. You can never truly come to terms with the fact that you have this certain life trajectory and that eventually, these men, they only want one thing for you, and eventually you're going to have to sort of, age into the role that you're at, and you're going to have to find a man that's sort of on your level that isn't going to necessarily fulfill a sort of inner gratification that you have towards your own beauty or your own sense of maintaining your own beauty or whatnot. And, she agreed. And a lot of older women like this, they have this sort of like quasi new age thinking that they are very accustomed to. And they use that. I wouldn't say it necessarily cope. I'd say that in some respects, a lot of like this new age thinking helps them in a way, but in another sense, it can enable them. And I think that, again, this goes back to what I was talking about, this sort of inner sadness that they inhabit. That, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like they obviously value the fact that younger men find them attractive, but it's sort of the lack of fulfilling these roles in life that lead them to devaluing themselves. Because men that are childless and older, they also hit a sort of wall. But they usually express it. And I know quite a few, maybe I'll talk about this actually, because in the place I live in, a lot of my father's friends are like this, sort of like older, younger boomer men that, didn't have wife and children, that stayed home to take care of their parents. And a lot of them have mental issues, and they sort of resign themselves to a quietism in life. And a lot of them have independent means as well. And a lot of them are stuck in their own ways. And they sort of express their lack of fulfillment differently than a lot of these older women who are still somewhat attractive and who fret over their own beauty and so forth. Sorry, I hope you can't hear that. There was some alarm outside, some car alarm. But anyways, there was this, I stumbled upon this review of the book that was turned into a movie with Tom Berenger. My favorite role, of course, is Sergeant Barnes, called In Praise of Older Women. And this reviewer on this reviewer on Amazon, this review is from 2001. It's 5 stars. I believe this person is in Canada as well. I wonder, sometimes those old Amazon reviews are fascinating, by the way. You have to read them. They're amazing. But this is the erotic novel, In Praise of Older Women. And this is so this review was originally written in 2001 in the French edition, the 3rd edition of In Praise of Older Women, from the 25th of May, 2001, the issue of Le Monde, the daily French paper. I believe it was from the Arts and Life section. Here's a translation of some extracts. So, quote, for 8 years, living the hand-to-mouth, Vincenzi, I believe, is it Viznetsky, but in Italian it would be Vincenzi, learned to become a writer in language of exile. So this is during World War II. This, I believe, he meets a Canadian woman or something in the book. It's been many years since I read In Praise of Older Women. At the price of discouraging some readers who are fond of sexual spectacles and amorphous, amorous gymnastics, it has to be said that the novel, far from being about fantasies and neuroses, seeks, like all great novels, to teach those who read it the truth about life. It is a novel of apprenticeship, with which would be a good thing and to offer to young people of both sexes as soon as they can approach the enchanted and agonizing shores of sexuality. Faced with the youth cult, and the barriers between age classes which bear down on modern societies, where each generation seems to belong to a different period of history, Vajda Visnitsky, having been lucky enough to grow up in what was still an integrated society, so says the novel, wishes to help to bring about a better understanding of the truth that men and women have a great deal in common, even if they are born years apart. Vajda begins then from a simple observation. When adolescent boys and girls, knowing nothing about life and the other sex, wish to begin lovemaking in their teen years, they do so clumsily with many fears and anxieties, preconceived notions, and models furnished by bad books. That which ought to be pleasure turns into a struggle. So again, nowadays it would be young men looking at prawn, often for a whole lifetime. After several catastrophic experiences with teenage girls, Vajda, who refuses to look on women as his enemies, so he refuses to become a true cell, a true cell doomer, decides to rid himself of his sexual illiteracy by learning from those who he knows, older women. In his pre-regenerations, he not only discovers simple and cheerful enjoyment, sexuality without anguish, free of guilt, sin, and acrobatics, he learns the warmth, tenderness, delicacy, and complexity of human relations, the voice of the other, the wearing away of time, understanding habit, and how to get it around it, the errors, the shames, the joys, the irony, the lightness, the profundity. Again, remember, this is a French review. The naturalness and exactitude of the novelist are fought against, intact in the text of the critic. Andres Vajda reads women the way that Vincenzi Vinetsky makes love with the book, with the same desire to understand through pleasure, the same opening up of the mind and the heart, the same freedom, the same lucidity and passion for truth and beauty. You would lose something if you read only one of these books without the other. Vinetsky's intelligence is so bracing, so contagious. The readers that reading his book plunges you into a bath of joy for at least a week. So, yeah, and then other people are talking about the book. It's very refreshing. It looks at a positive spin on sort of the sexuality of older women. And I believe, I don't know if I watched the movie with Tom Berenger. But, yeah, I think that in a way, there was one of the first sort of salvos into understanding the sexuality of older women towards younger men, which usually in literature, I know that the bias was always towards the opposite. It was always towards older men going after younger women. I mean, of course, Lolita. Yeah, so the thing is, there is a lot of, so this other reviewer says there's a lot of observations here, sort of the way that, a younger man relates to older women. So let's see, I'm reading a description of bodies and faces, a maxim worth of Lucian called, whenever sanctioned by society's principal good becomes a moral imperative. Humor that examines human interaction with sympathy and insight, which desire plays a larger role in the worth of repeating. The book was very well received in France. So apparently the French, they have this thing about older women. They have, they have that very French, the Macron pill, being with your you're a young man and you're with your older teacher and she's a female authority figure over you. And, yeah, so it's a very French thing, the older women and younger man. But I think that in some respects, not to be too harsh, the older women, yes, it is a longhouse relationship, but they can provide you, I think, at least for a time, this sort of role of the educator into the matters of the heart. That, especially nowadays, a lot of younger men feel that it's a very painless route to appreciating women, relatively painless compared to trying to, find yourself with younger women and going through all the foibles and so forth of that relationship. But at the same time, you have to realize that these relationships, they don't produce a lot of lasting outcomes unless you're Emmanuel Macron, and who knows if he has women on the side or whatnot. Because these relationships, when you're fundamentally at different points in your life, it's like, it can become difficult. And having spent time with older women who are at least still conventionally attractive, for a time, they become quite needy. They have demands of you that, as a younger man, when it comes to women, especially of, their fertile years, you tolerate more because you're trying to build a life together. But older women that place demands upon you, they start to baby you, but they start to nag at you. It's like, nah, it's never good. It's never good. And in some ways, having grown up as an only child around a lot of older people, I wasn't necessarily the archetype of the quiet, caught up in himself, only child who finds friendship in older people because that's who was around them. I was somewhat sort of like that, but not really. I mean, apparently, according to my parents, I was a very rambunctious child. But I think that these relationships, they're in some ways doomed to fail because you're just at fundamentally different stages in your life. A man who embraces the sort of what they perceive to be the carefreeness of an older woman is a man who is in some respects at a failure to launch. And who knows, maybe one of the most powerful nations in Europe is being run by a man who is at an arrested development point. I know Bap has a theory of why he always likes taking photos with shirtless men of a, African complexion. But I don't know. I'll leave those speculations to Bap and other people. But anyways, moving on to the simp. The simp mind is, in a way, a new romanticism that's very controversial because there are many pitfalls to being a simp, and I've often been accused of being a simp, of parading around the e-girls. There was this one tweet I think he deleted, though. My good friend, Yorge of the West, who goes by Resist Mordor on Twitter, at Resist Mordor. He had this tweet once, and I think he deleted it, though. I tried to find it. Where he said that, and he didn't at me, though. I found it. People added me. He said, Gio simps so hard and with such a numerous variety of women on the internet that he approaches the ideal of true divine love. And I remember another thing that my good friend Zero H.P. Lovecraft, who will be on the show, said to me once. He said, someone asked him, who is Gio? And he said, a man so filled with love it manifests in his body. So I am a unique authority about talking about the simp. But what do I mean? The simp is a wholly negative term. White Knight at least implied somewhat of a positive. It implied a sort of defense. But a simp simply asks for the affection of another without anything in return, without even the slightest possibility of something in return. Now, I think that most displays of simpery are obviously pathetic and don't get you anywhere, and really women hate simps, and the simp is a lowly creature, because like the nice guy, which was, I guess, the millennial iteration of simp, they sort of have an underhanded tactic about it. But this is what I mean. I think maybe I should come up with a new term called the Simp 2, like the Incel 2. The simp as a romantic ideal rather than the simp as a sufferer of, I guess, what the pickup artists call one-itis, and a sort of groveler who tries to woo a woman through unyielding deference and service and placating. This never works. Trust me, I know. But I think that what difference there is between a simp and someone who, I guess, appreciates the concerns and the beauty and the particular experiences of women is that when you, especially nowadays, especially in the online world, where even the sort of deference paid to women on the internet is considered simpery, I think that, because obviously all of this is mercenary, a lot of simps, they have this very weak-willed mercenary type of character. But let's look at it this way. Let's look at the simp as an ideal of divine love. As stupid and ridiculous and terminally online as I know this sounds, you know, again, referring to that tweet about the TikTok glow-in-the-dark woman, where I said that, you know, it's sort of this like weird mixing of Eros and Thanatos, this mildly attractive TikTok girl on a tank, meditating on how she will die in a chill way and life doesn't matter. That very much is like the Freudian Thanato impulse within the organism, within the self. And the Thanatos drive always yearns for completion, the way that Eros yearns for completion. But as Lacan tells us, this is an impossibility. So it is found elsewhere. It is mediated in self-destructive behavior and sometimes encouraged. Sometimes in feats of great heroism, Thanatos can express itself, apart from, you know, sunsetting or anheroing, whatever you want to call it. But the simp longs for the capacity for Eros, so they're willing to, in a way, make this sort of gratuitous display of themselves towards women. This never works out, of course, because there has to be that immediate impulse there to begin with. Then the sort of goofiness of courtship can be forgiven, in a sense, if there truly is a benefit to it. But what I mean by the simp as divine love is I mean that in the internet age, as people increasingly mediate themselves through the sort of personality that they display, the sort of brand being in this sort of psychopolitical era that we live in, like the e-girl itself, you know, as Crooner says, the essential girl. As they are playing a character, you in turn must play a character. But if you truly, and I do believe certain simps have this capacity, if you truly want to express yourself in a more authentic manner towards the opposite other, the object of desire, then simpery in a way is a, you know, it is a loathed thing because it is a display of vulnerability. That used to be the vulnerability that people expressed themselves in meat space, but in their most sort of private moments between the opposite sex. And I think that simpery, in a very sort of public and theatrical way, where there is always the gaze of the other, you know, viewing you simping, that sort of changes the relationship. And in a way, it becomes inauthentic. But I feel that the true romantic in the digital age can sort of allow themselves to have this space of vulnerability towards women. I'm talking, of course, from the male perspective. I mean, what is a female simp? It's obviously the pick-me, but the pick-me is different because, the pick-me tends to get laid, but, well, maybe not. But, I mean, I obviously can't know. Maybe I'll talk to Default about this, about the female simp, but or the pick-me. But I think that when it comes to a sort of internet romanticism, it becomes quite interesting when you view, and again, this is always the problem. There was this book, I believe it's from a Christian perspective. Let me look it up. There was this book about the ethics of love. Where is it? It's here. It's called Love Me, Love Me Not, The Ethics of Unrequited Love. I was searching this thing about Dante and so forth. And the book goes into the sort of what does it mean to demand to be loved, and what does it mean to give love. Of course, I think it comes from a Thomistic, biblical perspective. But essentially it runs into these problems of what does it mean to, because like Sartre said this, what is love but the demand to be loved, right? So what happens when, you're not entitled to the love of another, obviously, but at the same time, love is sort of like an essential thing. And even the ersatz replacements of that when it comes to the nature of unrequited love or simping becomes important. It almost, what is that effect called? Where the replacement of something, the sort of, the pantomime of something over a span of time can literally replace the real thing. Hence the OnlyFans thing, hence, the e-girl. The sort of replacement of something can be just as important as the thing itself. So this is a review of it. Here we go. Let me start in the middle. I think the person who wrote it is like a Christian pastor or something. Smith is very witty in pointing out that a lot of Christian treatment of sexual ethics consists in preaching to the choir, avoiding the area where Christians are most likely to struggle. For example, she investigates the darker side of believing that God might have one soulmate destined for each person. The spiritual game. I don't believe that. I don't know. You want to believe in soulmates, but I don't think that's realistic. The spiritual games people can play to turn someone down or lead them on. To what extent we can modify our affections and romantic preferences so as to be more mature. Smith argues that unrequited love has a purpose in the world that God has made, being made aware of the image and glory of another person as made in the image of God. So this is very similar to the American transcendentalist, particular Ralph Waldo Emerson, that talks about in his essay on love, how all love is a sort of mediation to the higher love of God. And even unrequited love can take on this. And of course, Dante being the best example, where Beatide or Beatrice lives on in immortality, even though she died at the age of 24, I believe. And we only know about this through Dante's obsession. And of course, I think, Dante meets her in the Paradiso. But being an artist, the thing is, that's the grand challenge, I feel, taking the simp as a romantic ideal, is that to not expect erotic exchange from the muse of a woman, from the ideal of a woman, rather than the living being of a woman, is, of course, an immense challenge, but it's something that a lot of men nowadays have to live with. And there is a way to live with it, I feel. There's a way to turn that simpery into a productive romantic ideal. So, which is something I have not fully figured out yet, but, who knows? Maybe I'm just being stupid for even enunciating such words, but who knows? She follows the Augustinian path of calling God to learn to desire what God desires. It is fascinating that Smith finds that of the students of Calvin, or students at Calvin, more than half of them believe that God had chose one specific individual for them to marry. However, less than 1/3 of the same students believe that God has determined one particular career for them to follow. Perceptively, she notes that his particular belief about marriage, not about deterministic providence, that is at work here. To me, this shows how privatized and self-centered a lot of Western evangelical Christians have become. Oh, sorry, she's not a Thomist. She's one of these evangelicals. Moving on. Clearly, the author has high standards for Christian marriage. Christians are told not to marry merely because they feel insecure, afraid, want to escape their parents, or want financial stability or affirmation. Christians should marry only those who enhance their ability to live Christian lives. Clearly, she is opposed to codependency. But I think even the simp has a one-way relationship to codependency, the way that unrequited love is. So that's a very funny ideal about how there is an ethical basis for it. So it's something similar I was reading in Roger Scruton. Let me read you the quote. This is from Sexual Desire by Roger Scruton. So he says that, he talks about Plato's question. Here, he talks about love. He says that, nevertheless, erotic love, like other love, is reason involved. It is true that in erotic love I may rejoice in your faults. So this is page 234. Which may be for me the precious sign of your dependence, the emblem of a lifetime at my side. However, must be careful how we understand such feelings. In one of his thin protestations against human normality, Nietzsche exhorts us to despise our friends so as to better to love them. The real meaning of such an exhortation is this: abolish the friendship of esteem and replace it with eros. For bonds of kinship apart, it is erotic love alone that can survive the awareness of another's depravity without declining into the weaker, more vacillating friendship, which nothing serious can be built. At such times there's nothing or not the happiest form of erotic love. To the extent that it is cherished, it is from an abundance of desire. Thus, when Genet's anti-hero waxes tender over the vices of their paramours, the effect is of a supreme sensuality outside the reach of normal human emotion. So, of course, that is Jean Genet, which very, very screwed up writing he wrote, but he was one of the great literary French figures that Sartre, through witnessing Genet's suffering as a prison, Prague, do not look that up, he calls him Saint Genet. So, here he says, Genet's anti-hero, and then he quotes him, we can see in this passage a particular inversion of the mythos of passionate love, in which everything is negated save that which is overcomes the subject of desire. The quality of Alberto as flesh, the reflections Genet's desire to build a wholly inverted love in which all values of community, in particular those which deny the validity of LGBT passion, are systemically negated. However, in this very negation, there is a reaffirmation of value. It is true that Genet's love seemed focused upon vice, but then so is his esteem. His love, like the esteem, is an exercise of what Sartre calls la morale de mal, moral sickness, an attempt to rebuild through the very erotic passion which society denies, the inversion of a normal love. Call Freud's inverted love is in fact moralized into a kind of inverted esteem. An inverted esteem, that is what the simp is. The simp is, of course, abnormal in this relationship. The simp is unrequited love taken to the nth degree. But at the same time, the simp experiences a love nevertheless, a form of esteem, a form of, in some ways, not totally selfless. I'm talking about the romantic ideal of a simp rather than just a nice guy. Say a simp that transcends the sort of, baser wants of erotic desire into a romantic ideal that loves without condition, in a way, without hope of return, without a hope that some precious e-girl will finally answer the DMs, right? And will, have a relationship or whatever, right? A boyfriend-free girl will pop into my DMs one day. If I'm have enough clout as an e-celeb, maybe it'll happen, right? Who knows? Anyways, the point being is that you have to realize that the simp is in a precarious position, especially in the modern age, especially in the digital hypermodernity, is that we know that this is sort of defective or this is maleficent behavior, that this isn't right, that this isn't proper or natural. But at the same time, a lot of young men do not have the choice. And so how do you sublimate those desires in this very unnatural relationship to simp for a woman that will never return your affection. You will forever be trapped in this space unless something happens, unless there is a change of focus. So in a way, it can be oppressive, especially from the male perspective. At the same time, if you transcend that ideal about that engagement with a woman, and here's the thing, as much as I've never had a relationship, I've had sort of emotional relationships with certain women. I've had sort of a deeper connection in a way, but that is more of like a friendship rather than transcending to the next level. And there are very positive and negative aspects of that. Negative being is that, I'll never have that true romantic ideal, and I'll never transcend true seldom. But at the same time, as much as that's sort of, it's something that Default said once in their podcast with Personality Girl many moons ago. Not many moons ago, but, she said that it's like, you're amazing, you're great, just not for me, for somebody else. Not for me, though. You're amazing and you're great, but, So, in a sense, the good part is that you can understand the way that, not just the way that women think, but also the way that women feel and their sort of concerns and their desires. But, because after a while, I said this once on Twitter, I said that as soon as you abandon all hope of achieving a relationship with a woman, your thoughts start to become clear. You start to tease them a little bit. You start to treat them like a friend rather than a desired object. You start to let your guard down a little bit. You're not trying to play a game. And of course I put the picture of Dr. Manhattan where you said like totally indifferent, because I think that to not expect reciprocity romantically from women, the way that certain simps have transcended mere symptom to something higher, very few have, of course. I have, of course, done this. Not like you, little simps. No, I'm kidding. I don't know if I've done this. It's not It's not for me to conclude that. I think that you can transcend this sort of longing and expectation and frustration that comes about from longing and expectation to the point where you can, not only treat women on the face of what they're saying and thinking and feeling, but you can sort of almost have a relationship similar to a muse and an artist. And because in that relationship, there is no expectation of carnal reciprocity, if you will, to put like a academic lingo to what I'm talking about, carnal reciprocity, if you know what I mean, right? So, in a way, there's a sort of inner stirring of the simp towards more of a divine philias, to more of a notion of a love that is higher than mere erotic desire. That eros can transcend itself, that the simp has to self-overcome, is what I'm saying. The simp has to overcome this very unnatural arrangement, which in a way is sort of voyeuristic. It's sort of like a paraphilia in a sense. Not to say that a simp is some different sexual category, the way that Genet was talking about with his own queerness, if you will. So he's saying here, it transcends that sort of desire into a state of esteem. That, I think, is what the simp can achieve, right? So, erotic passion, which society denies, the inversion of a normal love. It definitely is an inversion of a normal love, because love implies a reciprocity. So, in the next strophe here, the next subheading, Tensions in Love, Roger Scruton says, quote, erotic love seems, therefore, to defy the demand of reason, only to influence reason towards its own point of view, which is why McTaggart says that love is its own justification. Love moralizes its object so that it conforms to an ideal. When the object cannot be moralized according to that old ideal, love favors a new one, even an inverted one, in order that its object may seem worthy of its care. Love brings esteem within its orbit, often causing it to travel along unfamiliar paths. In love at first sight, therefore, the other is seen as a total moral presence, Desire is experienced as a moral demand and also as a moral right, I guess what Heidegger would call care for the world, right? Both of which seem in imagination to precede the first encounter. So then he reads a poem from Florizel. Still better what is done. When you speak, sweet, I'd have you to do it ever. When you sing, I'd have you buy and sell so to give alms, pray so, and for the ordering of your affairs, to sing them too. When you do dance, I wish you a wave of sea, that you might ever nothing be that, move still, so still. The poem expresses the scene of a beloved suspended before me, ineffably that in the beam of my desire she is poised, moves still so, and yet absorbed in her actions, and that in the moment all of her nature and character is concentrated. Her buying and selling, her giving of alms, her ordering of her affairs, all of her dancing and singing. The language here is the language of desire, which caresses its object with a palpitating tenderness. When you dance, do I wish you a wave, O sea, that you might ever do. Nothing be that, move still so. At the same time, the thought encapsulates the mystery of Perdita's incarnation, so singular in each particular, in the intimidations of a moral life that is entirely hers. So in other words, how can in this relationship, in this malfeasant relationship between the simp and whatever woman of their desire or multiple women, how can they have that same experience without reciprocity? Obviously, it's a love turned inwards. It's a love that takes the care and concern and gives it freely without expectation of reciprocity. And that, I think, is an ethical conundrum. It's not exactly like the abuser tactic of love bombing. I hate that stupid clinical term. I mean, love bombing does exist, but I think that, you know, these terminally neurotic women on the internet, they always use love bombing for everything. I think that women are not used to love bombing. That's just such a tragedy, you know? The artist used to love bomb the hell out of the muse, right? Out of women that they were painting or writing poetry about or whatnot. You know, women are used to that nowadays. Nowadays, yeah, because men are so timid for obvious reasons, for obvious legal, social reasons. Men are expected to be, you know, almost taking on the demure role. And, you know, women are just not used to love bombing the way that Mediterranean women still are. But, you know, they're not used to that sort of height of passion that is driven to insanity, because that's very scary to women. But you know, here's the secret though, is that when a woman is into you, they will tolerate that. But if you are giving that at a moment's notice, you know, that's the problem, I think, with a lot of spurgs and a lot of men who are sort of, they don't know really, they can't read the room, if you will, when it comes to women. You know, women will tolerate that if they desire you, if they let you do it, you know. Not that they let you do it, but I think that there's a time and place for all-consuming desire to override you. But I think that getting to that place is very difficult for a lot of men. Hey, it's difficult for me, you know, for obvious reasons. So I feel that the problem is that there's always this sort of contextuality to all of that sort of dance of love and eroticism. But you have to, like, actually be with somebody in order to pick up on those subtle, you know, suprasomatic cues. But when this is mediated by the online, becomes very difficult. So the simp is, in a way, trapped in that ideal. And this is another thing that book on the ethics of unrequited love talk about. Are you only merely caught in the ideal of someone rather than their reality? And is that relationship phenomenologically only in your head, as opposed to grafting this on this ideal, this divine ideal of that person as their best self onto them? And what are the implications of that? Because in a way, you're sort of robbing them of their facticity. You're sort of robbing them of... The negative side of that is that you're robbing them of their true being by only worshiping this ideal. But you can't be jaded as to totally demonize the way that a lot of third wavers have. Totally demonize this relationship between the ideal that a man has through their male gaze and the woman proper, woman qua, singular being, the facticity of this woman. Because that divine ideal of that completed woman, that ideal of that woman you have, can be very beautiful. It can be very productive and can inspire great things. And maybe that ideal can have some basis in fact. But you can't wholly demonize men for doing that, because men always will do that. They will always idealize from the particularity to the ideal. Women are the opposite. Women will singularize you. But men, I think, view you as an archetypal force. So, in a sense, you can't wholly demonize this reality that a lot of men experience, and I've been there, where you idealize a woman in toto, that they become this archetypal force in your life, and you dream about them, and you can't think about anything else, and you can't reconcile the fact that this is a, flesh and blood person that has all their flaws and whatnot, because men have a great capacity for tricking themselves in the wake of eroticism. But that being said, as much as it's bad for you and as it's bad for a woman if it's unrequited, then there still is the ideal there. We naturally create an ideal out of our desired object or desired person, in this case, not to use Freudian lingo. We create that ideal for a reason. It's very natural. But that's been, that's been shamed out of us as men. Because I hate to say it, but that ideal can lead to a lot of scary places. It can lead to an obsession that consumes you. And that's never good. Especially if you're a man that can't read a lot of social cues, who is neurodivergent, and who can't separate their life from their pursuit of the desired object, the desired person. I keep saying desired object. That's just the Freudian lingo for it. So, having been someone who's been there, I think that this ideal can destroy you in the end, but they can also produce, if you truly transcend your capacity for a lowlier form of simpery. You can use that ideal as a muse if you are an artist, if you're a thinker, if you're a writer, if you're someone who is a creative person. Even if you, I guess a scientist experiences some kind of like epiphanous creativity. But you know what I mean? Like, you can utilize that as motivation. I'm not going to lie to you. Whenever I work out now, I think of a woman that I desire, and I say to myself, if my body was different, then maybe one day, right? Think about that. I know how pathetic that sounds, but I'm telling you this. I'm being vulnerable for your benefit, whoever's, has made it this far in the broadcast. And we have a lot more to go, by the way. This is the Variety Mega Show. So the point being is that you create an ideal in your head, and that can lead to a lot of scary implications, but can also lead to something quite beautiful if you can temper that capacity for simpery within you, right? If you view women through a platonic ideal, that beauty can take hold. Then maybe, potentially, you can transmigrate those desires into a higher form of desire. So here, Roger Scruton says about, it's called, in the same section on love, Plato's question. What is it that tends such force to Plato's question? Love implicates the whole being of the lover and desires the whole being of the beloved. The beloved's embodiment may be crucial object of the love's interest, but love cannot be satisfied either with contemplation or with possession of the embodiment in the act of desire. It has to be both contemplating on one's love and, of course, eventually the consummation of that desire. You know what that word means, consummation. A mystical redescription of the two phenomena provide the easiest way to unite them, as when the Neoplatonist describes the aim of love as a spiritual copulation. Right? Even Shiva had that. Not going to get into it. It's quite graphic. A lot of mythological characters end up having sex with each other. But anyways. Or the aim of desire as physical union. Love has an aim which is separate from that of desire. Love seeks companionship in which mutual well-being will be a common purpose. So this is what Scruton said later on, the moral purpose of love. It is to nourish on counsels and conversations, on gifts and tokens, on affection, loyalty, and esteem. Moreover, love involves dependence. It is not a commodity that can be received, not from this provider, not from that. To love is to acquire a need for another individual, and to wish for love's solace there with him. Hence, where love is, there too is the certainty of grief. Plato's answer to the question is well known. Desire, he believed, could have no place in love, for desire is a physical urge, belonging to man's baser nature, a bodily appetite that we share with the animals. Its connection with love is at best accidental. Erotic love is a particular form of love which appears to be born in desire, which can remain love only by transcending desire. The conclusion is highly paradoxical for two reasons. First, how can erotic love, the pungent attachment to the soul of another, which contains for Plato the premonition of every human good, start up from so base an origin? And secondly, how can desire, on this account, be an expression of love? He goes on to explain. So, the Augustinian tradition described in chapter 5, yet surely, while not all desire expresses love, some does. That is an important part of the intentional structure. Furthermore, Platonism, which offers to explain the nature of erotic love, in fact does not do such thing. All love on this view becomes reduced to a single kind. The particularity of erotic love consists merely of its origin, that it begins in the perception of beauty, an origin, moreover, which the theory makes quite unintelligible. It is useful to compare Plato's theory to another which describes sexual love as a kind of composite state of mind. This comes in the symposium where Diomata talks about the true definition of love is the love of the forms, but then there's the definition of originally we were the Ouroboros eating itself, the snake eating itself. We were two beings. We were one singular being. Then, the gods chopped us up and divided us. Now we're trying to find the other half. So the conundrum is even heightened when it comes to e-relationships and the simp and, the parasocial relationship between the e-girl or between the desired object and this sort of unrequited love. It's like you only have the ideal. You only have that. You don't have the actual combination of moral concern. Maybe you have a capacity for moral concern or care, in the Heideggerian word care. But really, you don't have that because there's no reciprocity there. You don't have sort of the transcendence of erotic desire. But then you also have the ideal. You have the basis of what love is between physical desire and the ideal. You just have the ideal. So the question of the 21st century, in my opinion, when it comes to incels and femcels and so forth, and simps, is how do you be at peace with the fact that you just have that ideal? Because yes, we know it's harmful for men to engage in a parasocial relationship with some cam girl or some e-girl or some prawn star or whatever. That it's buying love, like Scruton says here. You can't buy it. But when you're only reduced to that, or is it even an anime character? Some kind of weirdo slice of life, RPG, AI bot that's an anime girl. Even that. You always have just the ideal in the end. So the question of the 21st century to solve is, how do you find comfort in that? How do you negate the detrimental aspects to one's own soul, to worship a false image, a graven image sometimes? But at the same time, how do you take that and use that as a motivation to love the higher things in life? Because I'll be honest with you, something about talking, even just talking to women, if you sort of bracket your own true cell nature and, meme politics, I think that, it's something, it can be refreshing sometimes to truly not have a base appetitive desire for a woman, but to truly contemplate a higher love that you have for one, even though the possibility of actual union is slim to none. How do you use that? How do you transform that into a higher ideal? Into not just the love of a particular woman, but the love of women in general. and eventually the love of God, the love of art, the love of beauty itself. There are certain beauties that you find, even if you say that they're mid or whatever, that even they may be mid, they still have a particularity that you enjoy, that you find special. And that vision, that beauteous vision of them, can spurn something deeper within you. Not deep within your member, but deep, I mean, within your soul. And I think that, especially in the political right, we sort of neglect that. We sort of cast that aside. We sort of break because the modern world has broken these traditional bonds between men and women. We're sort of trying to rediscover what true filial love actually means, what true eroticism actually means in this world where, ironically enough, as everything becomes sexually charged and pornographied, nothing is truly erotic or nothing is truly sexual. There's sort of a permeated asexuality to everything nowadays because true desire is no longer there. It's in your face all the time. It becomes mechanical. It becomes debased. It becomes profaned. But not in the good sense of profane, the way that I know Giorgio Agamben, he talks about profanation means turning something into common use that was originally sacred, that was originally special. But when you do that to the object of love, to the desired person of love, then in a way, it's like, you know, that meme phrase, like, bro, she don't belong to you, she belongs to the streets. That's brutal, that's terrible. And like I was saying about promiscuous women, a lot of them can appear to be wise, can appear to almost be maternal. Well, I would say eternal, because the promiscuous woman will always be with us. Kind of like the beggar and like war and other things that will always be with humanity. I think that, in a way, the simp is getting at something, is getting at the sort of brokenness of the relationship between men and women, but also how do you go back to a divine and beauteous ideal of what love is, especially the love of a man towards a woman. How do you go back to that in a fallen age? And that, I think, is, at least in its sort of, you know, prenatal stages, something there. I think that truly there's something in the, you know, maybe not the coon brain, but certainly these men who report that they give money to OnlyFans people and that they have an attachment to a certain waifu or anime character. Well, the waifu is more of a logical defense, actually. That is pure ideal. But I think that, you know, it's not just that they're motivated by cooming. They're not just motivated by base desire, because really, if you're just motivated by the desire of a particular look of a woman or a particular fetish, then it's like, you know, there's a whole sea of content out there for you. But I mean, these men that are attached to a particular cam girl or particular OnlyFans creator or a particular e-girl, I think that they truly idealize them. And that in a proper age and time, they would have idealized the woman next door. They would have found their own Dulcinea, right, from Don Quixote. You know, I tweeted this once. I said that lying in my DMs one day out there is my own Dulcinea. And, you know, it's like one of my favorite songs by the band Isis is called Dulcinea, where, let me read you the lyrics, actually, where they talk about this sort of, in Don Quixote, they talk about how the sort of like what people consider the absurdity and the ridiculousness of this sort of paranoid, or not paranoid, but this sort of like fantastical illusion, this elaborate LARPing, this elaborate fantasy that Don Quixote is caught into. That's like sort of to the point where he creates his own princess out of a peasant girl. It's sort of like transcending the sadness of that into something that is very approaching something like divine love in Don Quixote. So the lyrics are very simple. One of my favorite parts is the last part of the instrumental part of the last part of the song, It's sort of like you're in a raging sea is the only way I could describe the music. So the lyrics go, he is not mad. His thought is clearer than the saner man, for in her he saw beauty overflowing through the tattered clothes. She was his queen. She was his queen. In dreams he wanders the dark in search of her. Maybe the simp is wandering in the darkest depths of the internet. The sea, as my good friend Zero H.P. Lovecraft says, the internet is a sea, and perhaps the simp is searching for their ideal, is searching for their Dulcinea in the darkest of depths of the DMs and of the whatever. I mean, maybe I'm making too much of this. Maybe I am just being too ridiculous and fantastical about this, but maybe there is some truth to that. Maybe there is some truth. Maybe if the simp learns, if the incel learns, if the femcel even learns to be comfortable with this platonic ideal of the other, even though the flesh and blood relationship is in a way an impossibility, maybe then things can start to become better. Maybe the OnlyFans woman doesn't feel the need to market herself in a very debased, parasociality with the simp, with the pay pigu. Maybe there could be a transcendence of that relationship. I mean, of course there won't be. Of course, millions have to... No, never mind. All of society must collapse. All of society must go by the wayside. Everything must fall. Everything must... There has to be total... Never mind. I think that people are going to start realizing this. I think people have already realized this. They've realized the problem with dating apps, the problem with the, parasociality on the internet, the problem between men and women. But I think that for the time being, at least in the sort of interim period between a rediscovery of true eroticism and true relations between men and women, I think that the femcel and the incel and the simp can come to terms with it, at least in part, by finding their ideal, by living within the ideal, by turning it into motivation for higher pursuits, by finding their, whatever the female equivalent would be, but for the male equivalent, finding their own Dulcinea. There's one last thing I wanted to cover before I go to the super spicy Patreon version where I review the Duke of Burgundy, and I talk about wholesome Chungus nationalism. There is this poem I read years and years ago that I bought the collection of poems of his work. The famous Japanese Zen poet Saigyo, he had this poem called Love Likened to Lemongrass. And I think throughout my life, I remember my grad supervisor, who became very close to me, and I haven't talked to him in a few years now, and maybe I should message him. He read this poem in class once, and no, he read another poem, but then I found this one at random, and I told him about it, and he said, well, it's significant to you because you picked it out. And I remember I could think to, even when I read this years and years ago when I was an undergrad, I remember thinking that this speaks to my experiences or lack thereof in life. And how when you're someone who goes through multiple bouts of unrequited love, you sort of sway and you go through the motions and you go through the same process of this sort of fluttering of possibility that is then crushed in a sea of doubt and uncertainty and self-loathing. And then you sort of let go of it. And then it just washes over you. A lot of men have experienced this, obviously. And then you start to ease up a little bit in your life, in your head. The stirring in your head sort of lessens. The sort of the chaos in your heart, it stills a little bit. And there's a feeling in the back of your heart where you feel a bit calmer. And then, of course, you move on, you repeat the cycle with another woman that you desire, and then, But in that process, there still is that ideal of love itself. So there is a sense in which when that calmness in your heart, in the back of your heart, takes over a little bit more, you can sort of reflect on what you're doing a bit better. You can sort of reflect on what drove you in this particular woman to think those thoughts and those feelings, and to examine why you desire this certain person and why you desire itself, why you keep falling into this game of unrequited desire and courtship that never goes anywhere. At least that's just my experience. Maybe you're different. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones to not be a true soul. In that case, I hate you. No, I'm kidding. I love you. Don't worry about it. So this is Love Likened to Lemongrass by Saigyo. Does this love of mine face only one way, never perversely straying? Rather, it is like lemongrass in the meadow, tossed in ever-shifting winds. This love of mine face only one way only, never perversely straying, meaning that does lemongrass in the wind, if you've ever seen lemongrass, does it only blow one way in the wind? No. There is a multiplicity of love. And when you are a simp in a way, when you are someone who is lovesick, is a, stumble down romancer, is a hopeless romantic, or whatever you want to call it, your love tends to toss and tends to sway. Your heart is sort of guided by a piece of string in the wind, or like lemongrass in the wind. It sways every which way. But that you think that that's a negative thing, and in some ways, yes, it is negative, because matters of the heart can be very fickle sometimes, especially when you're chronically used to dejection and the throes of rejection and dejection and so forth. But really, the positive side of that is that you can become a person that inhabits a multiplicity of loves. A multiplicity of love towards the ideals that you have of women, of anything, or the ideal you have of those women can transcend, can turn into something else. So in a way, Saigyo is dealing with this. He is reconciling this reality that your love is fickle and will blow in the wind every which way. Every which way. And that sometimes you have to just let the wind wash over you. You have to let this sort of fickleness of love and the multiplicity of love grow within you. Never always being cemented into one person or one thing. And that is something that, if you are a romantic type, is crushing and terrible, because you have this high ideal that only this person will matter, and only this special context, she will eventually come to me. And then it'll be perfect. It'll be ideal. It will be this glorious thing. But it's never that ideal in real life. Your love will always perversely stray. Your love will always be tossed in the wind like lemongrass. And sometimes you have to be comfortable with this. And you have to use that. And you have to say that, yes, my love is a multiplicity. My love is already something that brims within me and will stray, but will eventually always keep an ideal in mind. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Content Minded podcast. If you wish to support me and to unlock every full and uncensored version of each week's podcast, please go to patreon.com/GiantArtProductions. You will not only get every full and uncensored version of Content Minded, but you will also get exclusive content, such as my Giant Art Reviews series, where I analyze and pick apart various interesting and insightful books or essays. Every episode will be uploaded to Anchor, which will upload them to Spotify, as well as my backup channel on Odyssey. Please look out for new content every single week, and please look out for The Digital Archipelago with me and the Prudentialist. Thank you once again to all of my beautiful patrons. Thank you all for keeping the content renaissance alive. As I always say, God bless and goodbye.